They threw 2,000 yen on the floor in front of me, and that was how I learned I'd been reincarnated as the villain. Not the hero, not the scrappy underdog with a heart of gold and a cheat code hidden in his palm. The villain, the rich kid in the good shirt that every story like this keeps around for exactly one reason, so the audience has someone to watch get flattened. You know the type. He struts around for 8 chapters going, "Do you know who my father is?" And then the hero walks in and turns him into a wet mark on the marble, and everyone cheers. I woke up as that guy. The memories came in like a bad hangover, all at once and in the wrong order. My name was Chung Wei. My family used to own half of Zhongcheng. Used to, because for 3 months a man named Fan Hao had been quietly strangling us, and today was the day the rope pulled tight. I was still getting used to having a face when Steward Zhang came in with the news, and Steward Zhang delivering news is a whole event. He's about 60, he's been with the family since before I existed in either life, and he loves the original me with a loyalty you cannot buy, and frankly should not be able to earn by being the person the original Chung Wei had been. He came in wringing his hands hard enough to start a fire. "Young master." Pause. Deep breath. "The bank called in the loans, all of them, this morning." "Okay," I said. "And the suppliers, every supplier, they won't take our calls." Another breath, and this one shook. "It's him again. That Fan Hao. He went to each of them in person." Here's the thing, the original Chung Wei knew that I was just now inheriting. Fan Hao wasn't some tycoon. 3 months ago, he'd been a nobody with a medical license and a chip on his shoulder. Then something in him woke up. The memories were fuzzy on the how, and overnight he was a genius doctor curing the incurable, and every rich old man in the province wanted to adopt him. The brilliant consortium bankrolled him. A financial giant named Chairman Zhao became his sugar daddy. And Fan Hao, being the protagonist, had decided that step 1 of his glorious rise was grinding the arrogant Chung family into paste. Personal. It was personal for him, because the original me had once done something petty and unforgivable, which was get in the way of him and a woman named Ma Meiling. So that was my situation. Bankrupt in a marble house, hated by a man the universe had personally blessed, and one nudge away from the part of the story where the villain dies in an alley so the hero can feel something. I should have been panicking. I wasn't, because a blue window had opened in the corner of my vision and it was already talking. Villain boss system activated, host mission, shatter the destiny of the protagonist Fan Hao. I read it twice. Then I laughed, and Steward Zhang took a step back like I'd finally cracked. See, if you've read as many of these as I have, and in my old life I'd read a landfill's worth, you know exactly how the villain's story ends. You never get to be the one holding the system. The system always goes to the sad orphan with the pure heart, and here it was, glowing politely in the corner of the room, offered to the one guy in the entire genre who was supposed to lose. "Explain the terms," I said out loud, which made Steward Zhang very quietly decide to go get me some water. The system was happy to. Every time I tormented the protagonist, every opportunity I stole, every ally I turned, every rung of the ladder I kicked him off of, his destiny halo would drop and I'd get paid. Gift packs, treasures, techniques, pills, money, and fragments. 6 fate fragments would let me recruit a god-tier henchman and, better, take on a matching identity of my own. The system's whole philosophy was the slow way, and I could feel it warming to the subject as it walked me through it. Torment him, savor it, let him rise, let him believe, let him get a woman and a mentor and a treasure and real hope in his chest, and then take it back one piece at a time so the despair compounds, so a protagonist properly cultivated pays out for years. Let him claw halfway up the cliff and then cut the rope. Draw it out. I looked at the 2,000 yuan still sitting on my floor. Or, I said, I could just kill him. There was a pause from the window, a long one. If a user interface could sweat, this one was sweating. Host. The gift packs are generated by the process of tormenting the... Right, but if he's dead, there's no more torment problem to manage. It's very clean. Very efficient. Host, that is not how... Give me my starter pack, I said. Let's see what I'm working with. And that was the first time I broke my own system, but it would not be the last. And honestly, getting to watch a smug little blue window slowly realize it had been assigned to a maniac became one of the small, reliable joys of my new life. The pack opened, light everywhere, the whole dramatic production. When it cleared, one line hung in the air. Loyal subordinate acquired, Sun Biao. Corresponding identity granted, chairman of Taihei Capital. I didn't know the name yet. I would in about a minute, because in the neighboring city of Huacheng, in a glass tower with his name on it, on the 88th floor, a man who controlled more money than the entire Chung family had ever dreamed of touching suddenly stood up in the middle of a board meeting, walked out mid-sentence, and told his driver to get the car. Sun Biao was the CEO of Shengxi Taihei Group. He was, no exaggeration, one of the richest men within 1,000 kilometers, the kind of man whose mood moved markets, whose lunch reservations made the news. And the system had just rewritten reality so that somewhere in his heart, load-bearing and absolute, was the belief that Mr. Cheng Wei of Jiangcheng was the most important person alive and had been for years. His assistant asked where they were going. Jiangcheng, he said. Mr. Cheng called. I had not called. I found out later the system just plants the certainty and lets the man invent the phone call himself, which is somehow funnier. By the time Steward Zhang came back with my water, I had a plan, a god of wealth driving 2 hours to bow to me, and a protagonist to kill. I took the glass, I drank it. Life, I decided, was going to be fun. Steward Zhang did not agree, on account of not knowing any of this yet. He set the tray down and gave me the look he'd been giving me all morning, the one that said the young master had gone somewhere he couldn't follow. Young master, he said carefully, we should discuss whether the family should leave the city, quietly, before that man finishes with us. We're not leaving. Young master, with respect, there is nothing left to stay for. He has taken it all. He hasn't taken anything, I said. He's just holding it for me for a while. Sit down, Steward Zhang. In about 2 hours, a man is going to come to this house and put his forehead on our floor, and I don't want you to have a heart attack when he does. He sat, mostly because his legs weren't giving him a choice. And I went to go read everything my new memories had on a man named Fan Hao, because if you're going to end someone's whole destiny, it's rude not to learn their schedule first. By the time Sun Biao's car came through our gate, I'd read enough of Fan Hao's file to know 3 things. He was cocky, he was on a rocket ship, and he thought the Chung family was already a corpse he was just waiting to stop twitching. All 3 of those were about to become extremely useful. The car, by the way, was worth more than our house. A whole motorcade of them, actually, black and gleaming, disgorging bodyguards in matching suits who fanned out across our courtyard like this was a state visit. And then Sun Biao got out. Silver hair, the kind of watch that doesn't have numbers because if you have to ask, you can't afford it. And he crossed the courtyard, and he got down on the floor and put his forehead against it. Mr. Cheng, he said to the marble, I came as fast as I could. I'm sorry I'm late. Behind me, something in Steward Zhang quietly came unscrewed. This was a man he'd seen on magazine covers. This was the god of wealth of 2 provinces, kowtowing in our courtyard to the young master he'd been trying to talk into fleeing the city an hour ago. Steward Zhang's mouth opened. No sound came out. He would spend the next several months in this exact state on a rotating basis, and I came to think of it as his resting expression. Get up, little son, I said, and I have no idea where the little son came from. It just arrived, fully formed, the way you'd talk to a nephew, and Sun Biao beamed like I'd knighted him. He got up. He dusted off his knees. And then, in the tone of a man reviewing a lunch menu, he said, You mentioned a Fan Hao. I looked into him on the drive. Would you like him dealt with quietly or loudly? I can do social, freeze his accounts, blacklist him from every hospital and firm in 3 provinces, make him unhireable and unbankable by dinner. I can do medical, commit him, get him declared unwell. He spends the foreseeable future in a nice quiet room with padded walls, or a small, pleasant smile. The permanent option. I want to stress that he offered these the way you'd offer someone coffee, tea, or a knife. Behind me, Steward Zhang made a small, strangled sound. An hour ago, this man had been begging me to flee the city in the dark. Now the god of wealth of 2 provinces stood in our foyer reciting a menu of ways to end a person, and the young master was reading it over like the lunch specials. Young master, he whispered. The social one. Surely the social one. Nobody has to actually… Fan Hao put a knife in my family's throat and smiled doing it, Steward Zhang. I kept my eyes on Sun. Let's not pretend we're deciding whether. We're deciding how fast. The permanent option, I said. Very good. He was already dialing. I know a man. Cobra 5. Cleanest hands in the region. He owes me a favor, and he's never once left a mess. And the blue window, which had been sulking in silence since I stiffed it on the slow torment, piped up one more desperate time. Host, killing the protagonist outright forfeits an estimated 90% of your potential gift pack income over the… Noted, I said. Do it. That evening, Fan Hao walked out of the Jihui Company Tower feeling like the king of the world because he just finished carving up the last of my family's assets and had a dinner reservation to celebrate. I know exactly how he felt because Sun and I watched the whole thing on a phone from a car across the street, and Sun had brought sunflower seeds. I want to be clear that I did not ask for sunflower seeds. He just had them. A god of wealth, in a car worth more than a house, cracking seeds between his teeth and passing me the bag like we were at a matinee. I took some. They were good. Fan Hao turned into the parking structure. The camera on his own car's dash cam, Sun's people had gotten into it hours ago, showed him strolling toward the elevator, whistling, and out of the concrete shadow, a man stepped up beside him, fast and bored, and put a knife into the side of his neck and kept walking. Fan Hao dropped. It was not a battle. It was a product demo. Efficient, said Sun, chewing. And then the protagonist glowed. I'd read about this in his file and half believed it. There, on the parking garage floor, a ring of thin silver needles rose out of Fan Hao's own sleeves and drove themselves into his body, and a tiny porcelain bottle no bigger than a thumb cracked against his chest and spilled a light that wasn't quite light. The knife wound closed. His eyes snapped open. He sat up, gasping, alive, staring around at nothing, because Cobra 5 was already 2 floors away buying a coffee. The window in my vision dinged, almost smug. Protagonist Fan Hao possesses a life-preserving treasure. Destiny. Halo. 20,000, minus 1,000, 19,000. Fate fragment obtained. Huh, I said. He came back. He came back, Sun agreed, and without me saying a word, he was already texting Cobra 5. Because that is the beautiful thing about a subordinate, the system has personally soldered to your interests. You don't have to explain the follow-through. Cobra 5 set down his coffee, walked back down 2 flights, and put the next knife through Fan Hao's heart from behind while the man was still sitting there trying to understand his own resurrection. Down again. Glow again, dimmer this time, the little bottle guttering like a candle in wind. 19,000 became 18. Another fragment ticked into my count. And Fan Hao, on his second death and second clawing back, finally understood that the shadows were not done with him and did the smartest thing he'd done all day, which was run. He ran out of that garage with his shirt soaked and his genius doctor composure nowhere to be found, and he did not stop. Sun offered me the seed bag again. Do we chase? I thought about it. 2 deaths, 2 fragments, 2 dents in his halo, and the man now knew fear in a way he hadn't an hour ago. And a treasure that could bring him back from the dead was a treasure that would eventually run dry. The light had been weaker the second time. You don't have to win the whole war on the first night. You just have to make sure the other side goes to bed afraid. No, I said. Let him run. He'll rationalize it by morning, decide it was a mugging or a test or destiny testing his resolve. Guys like him always do. And then he'll walk right back into the next thing, because he can't imagine a world where he's not the main character. I cracked a seed. We'll be standing in it when he gets there. Sun laughed like that was the wisest thing he'd ever heard. Behind us, the city lit up for the night, oblivious, and somewhere in it, a genius doctor was hyperventilating in an alley and telling himself he was fine. Fan Hao did exactly what I said he'd do. By morning, he'd decided the parking garage was a random mugging, and by the afternoon, he had something much better to think about, because the Jihui company, where he was a rising executive, where he'd been so sure the throne was already his, called him into the boardroom and told him a whale had arrived. An investor, a quiet, enormous investor who wanted to pour money into the company and had, specifically, asked for Fan Hao to lead a project called Yingdong Jillian. Billions on the table, and Fan Hao, sitting there in his good suit, put it together in his head the only way his head knew how to put things together, which was that he was special and the universe had noticed. He decided Ma Meiling must have recommended him. Ma Meiling, the director he'd always fancied, the very woman the original Cheng Wei had once humiliated himself over. Fan Hao smiled to himself and thought, of course she sees my worth. She did not recommend him. I want that on the record. The doors opened and Sun Biao walked in, and every executive in that room stood up so fast they nearly hurt themselves, because you don't stay seated when that much money enters a room. And then I walked in behind him, and Sun half turned and did the small deferential thing with his shoulders that a man like him only does for one person, and the whole board watched the god of wealth defer to a kid, to the young master of a family they'd all heard was finished, to Cheng Wei. You could see the exact second Fan Hao's face fell off. You, he said. Me. I agreed, and sat down at the head of his table. I'll spare you the corporate choreography. Here's what it came down to. Sun set 500 million on the table as an investment, contingent on some housekeeping, and then let the board work out for themselves what the housekeeping was. Boards are quick that way. Within the hour they had, one item at a time, taken Fan Hao apart. They stripped his authority. Ding, the window in my eye chimed, and his destiny halo slid from 18,000 towards 17. They canceled the Yingdong Zillion project out from under him and handed it to a committee. Ding, 16. They disbanded the team that had been loyal to him, reassigned every last one, walked them out past his glass office one by one while he watched. Ding. And through all of it, do you know what he did? He sat very still and told himself it was a test, an interview, a trial the mysterious investor had cooked up to see if the great Fan Hao could keep his composure under pressure. He was actually a little proud of how well he was passing it. That's the thing about protagonists. You can take everything they have and they'll narrate it back to themselves as a training montage. To grease it, I gave the board 3 projects, real ones, ready to print money, the kind of thing that takes a normal company a decade of R&D. They came out of a gift pack. To me they were junk, the sort of thing the system hands out by the fistful, but to a boardroom of ordinary businessmen they were 3 golden geese landing on the table at once, 70-30 in their favor, no strings but one, the one string being Fan Hao. By the time I'd finished sliding the folders across the table, there wasn't a person in that room who'd have crossed the street for him. And then they fired him. Officially, on paper, escorted to the elevator fired, ding, 15,000. Another little rain of gift packs I didn't bother opening yet. Ma Mei-ling was the only one who said anything. She stood up near the end, sharp suit, sharper eyes, the woman half the men in that building were quietly in love with, and she said, "This is excessive, he hasn't done anything to warrant," and then she caught the room's temperature, and she caught the look on my face, and she stopped. She'd come in expecting to see the arrogant, foolish Cheng Wei she remembered, the boy who'd once made a fool of himself in front of her. She was looking at someone else. I watched her recalibrate in real time. It's a specific kind of intelligence, knowing when the ground has moved, and she had it. Fan Hao, being walked out, saw her stand up for him, and his whole ruined afternoon reorganized itself around it. She defended me. She's on my side. He clung to that going down in the elevator like it was the last handhold on a cliff, which, in fairness, it was. He went home and broke everything breakable in his apartment, and then he did the one move he had left. He called his sugar daddy, Chairman Zhao of the brilliant consortium, the money that had made him, the man who'd bankrolled his whole meteoric rise, and he told Zhao to find out who this Cheng Wei really was, and to bury him. Zhao, who did not yet know that the ground had moved for him too, promised to look into it. And me? I asked the system where Fan Hao would go next. It has a feature for that, a thing it calls a plot prompt, a little window into what the protagonist's destiny wants to hand him, if I'd only stop stepping on the hose. I used one, and it showed me a birthday. Yang Guodong, the richest man in the province, was turning 60, and at his party his beloved granddaughter Yang Lihua was fated to collapse with a failing heart, and Fan Hao, genius doctor, man of destiny, was fated to be the only one in the room who could save her. Cure the girl, win the old titan's gratitude, get folded into the most powerful family in 3 provinces, and climb right back up the ladder as if I'd never touched him. That was the plan the universe had for him. So I sent Sun to the birthday party a day early. That night my phone buzzed. A message from a number I hadn't saved yet, though I could guess. Ma Mei-ling. It said, "Does the confession still count?" The original Cheng Wei had confessed to her once, badly, in front of the wrong people, and Fan Hao had used it to humiliate him, and it had curdled into 3 years of pettiness. I looked at the message for a while. Then I set the phone face down without answering, because a woman that sharp is worth more when she's curious than when she's certain, and because I had a party to ruin. The Zhang birthday was held in a hotel ballroom the size of an airplane hangar, and Fan Hao arrived to find that his invitation was in a desk drawer at a company that had just fired him. Small thing, fatal thing. He stood at the door in his best suit while the attendants explained very politely that his name wasn't on the list. Now a genius doctor with a rocket ship under him doesn't panic at a door. He works the crowd. Fan Hao started catching elders as they arrived. The Song family patriarch, then old Yang, men who'd taken his calls last week, asking each of them to just walk him in. He'd repay it 100-fold. They knew his talent. And every single time, before the old man could answer, one of Sun's people would materialize at his elbow and murmur something, and the old man's face would smooth over into a stranger's, and he'd apologize and go inside without him, because Sun had gotten there first. Sun had spent the afternoon doing what Sun does. He'd let it be known quietly to every noble family in the room that the man who wanted their favor was radioactive, and that the person you actually wanted to be nice to tonight was a young Mr. Cheng. And to make the point in a language rich families understand, he dangled a high-end commercial street development, the kind of once-a-generation deal that mints dynasties, and let them all understand it would go to whoever was most helpful and least stupid. Helping Fan Hao was suddenly the stupidest thing a man could do. Ding, 14,000. He hadn't even gotten inside yet. He got in eventually, through a side door, on the arm of one of Ma Mei-ling's friends who took pity on him. Just in time too, because destiny is nothing if not punctual. Halfway through the toasts, Yang Lihua, the old man's treasure, the granddaughter the whole party revolved around, made a small sound, put her hand to her chest, and folded to the floor. Her heart. The room went from champagne to screaming in about 4 seconds. And this was the moment. This was the scene the universe had storyboarded for Fan Hao months ago. He was supposed to shove through the panic, drop to his knees, produce a miracle from his sleeve, and rise up reborn in the richest man's gratitude. He got 2 steps, because Sun was already there. He'd been standing near the girl all evening, on my instruction, waiting for a collapse a plot prompt had promised me a week before, and the instant Yang Lihua hit the floor, he was down on one knee beside her, pressing a heart-locking vine to her chest, a genuine treasure delivered that morning by the compassion of his benefactor, Mr. Cheng. Her color came back, her breathing smoothed out. The crisis ended in Sun's hands while Fan Hao was still 3 steps away with his own miracle half drawn out of his sleeve, watching a god of wealth perform his big scene for him. He tried anyway. God love him, he tried. Stop, that treatment's dangerous. I'm a doctor, let me through. The room turned and looked at him the way you look at a man shouting during the vows. Who let him in? Isn't that the one Master Sun warned us about? Somebody get security. He went from savior to gate crasher in the space of 1 sentence in front of the exact 300 people he'd come to impress. And then Sun, having saved the girl, stood up, dusted his knees, and turned the knife with a smile. As compensation for the distress Fan Hao's outburst had caused the Zhang family, he suggested, reasonably warmly in front of everyone, that the young man hand over that little medicine he was clutching, Fan Hao's rejuvenation pill, his master's treasure, one of the crown jewels of everything he owned. And with the whole room's contempt pressing on him and 2 of Sun's men already at his shoulders, he handed it over. He actually handed it over. Then they walked him out. Ding. 13,000, then 12. The old man, Yang Guodong, spent the rest of the evening gripping my sleeve with both hands, thanking me for the vine that saved his lihua, and by dessert he'd started glancing between his granddaughter and me with a particular gleam that grandfathers get. I filed that away for later. Back home, I opened a stack of gift packs. Out came spirit pills. Real ones. Medicinal. The kind that meant I could stop borrowing Sun's treasures and start playing doctor myself when I felt like it, plus another fate fragment ticking me closer to my next god tier higher. I turned the extorted rejuvenation pill over in my fingers and set it aside. It wasn't Fan Hao's real trump card. His file made that much clear. It was a nice pill. It wasn't the thing that would save his life at the end. I was going to need to take that from him too. But there was no rush. He had so much left to lose, and I was learning to enjoy the pace. A few days later, Fan Hao spotted Ma Meiling getting into a red Ferrari, done up like she was going somewhere that mattered, and he followed her, because of course he did. She was going somewhere that mattered. She was going to dinner with me, at a revolving restaurant on top of the tallest building in Jiangcheng, and Fan Hao came off the elevator just in time to see her laughing at something I'd said. He lost it. He crossed the whole restaurant to expose me, to tell her what kind of monster I was, to save her, and Ma Meiling stood up before he got a full sentence out, picked up her wine, and threw it in his face. In front of everyone, told him he was pathetic, told him to get out, told him never to come near her again, every word cold as a dropped call. Here's what he didn't understand, because he could never once imagine himself as anything but the center of the story. She was saving his life. She'd already worked out that being seen to care about Fan Hao was the fastest way to get him killed, and she was burning the bridge loudly enough for the whole room to witness it. It cost her something to do it. I watched it cost her. Fan Hao just saw the wine. Ding, 11,000. His next idea was the herb auction. Chairman Zhao, still his backer, still his money, blissfully unaware the ground had moved, invited him, and Fan Hao saw his comeback in it. Quietly, under Zhao's name, he'd buy up a specific list of rare herbs and refine a martial master promotion pill, the thing that would finally push him from soft, ordinary flesh into a real martial artist, a man who couldn't just be knifed in a garage. It was a good plan. It was, in fact, exactly the plan the universe had drawn up for him, which meant the system handed me the shopping list before he'd finished writing it. Sun and I took the #1 VIP box. Fan Hao and Zhao took box 7. And every single time a herb on his shopping list came up, the Tianhua root, the scrofularia, the little grade 3 bamboo shoot from Emerald Valley that nobody else in the room even recognized as worth a bid, my paddle went up last and stayed up. The Tianhua root opened at 1,000,000. Box 7 bid 1-2. I bid 2. Box 7 tighter, 2-5. I bid 3-5 and watched the number climb the wall of their box through the glass, watched 2 men decide they could still win this. They took it at 3-5. And then the very next lot, the one they actually needed, I bought outright before they'd finished congratulating themselves. That was the whole game. I didn't just outbid him. I made him overpay, let him chase a 1 million item up to 3.5 so he'd feel the thrill of winning it, then lifted the next one out from under him while he was still counting his change. By the end of the night, he'd spent a fortune and assembled nothing, which is a very particular and expensive kind of poverty. Then Sun walked over to box 7 and had a quiet word with Chairman Zhao. "Your genius doctor," Sun said. "The 200 rare herbs he always makes you buy. Do you know what they're for?" "For the medicine," Zhao said. "They're for the theater. The medicine is 1 pill. He could make it in an afternoon with pocket change." Sun set a small porcelain case on the table and opened it. "This one. I made it this morning. Try it against anything of his." Zhao was a financier before he was anyone's patron, and a financier's whole job is knowing when he's been running a loss he didn't see on the books. He held the pill up to the light. He held it there a long time. Then his face did the thing a proud old man's face does when it works out how many months it's been paying full price for a card trick. He didn't just defect, he made Fan Hao hand over every herb he'd bankrupted himself buying that evening as repayment for the investment fraud, and Fan Hao, with a room full of witnesses watching his own backer turn on him, had no play that didn't make it worse. He walked out of that auction house with less than he'd walked in with, which by then was becoming his signature move. Ding ding ding, 10,000, 9, 8. I found out where he went next because the system likes to twist the knife for me as a courtesy. He went into a public restroom and cried, sat on the floor of a marble stall in a luxury auction house and sobbed, and in the middle of it, half to himself, he pulled up his sleeve and looked at the tattoo there, a single character, medicine, and I understood I was looking at the real trump card at last, not the rejuvenation pill, not the herbs. His master had inked something into his skin that would only unlock when he became a martial master, and it was going to be the thing that mattered. Good to know. I'd take that too, when it was ripe. He pulled himself together and decided that if he couldn't buy the herbs, he'd borrow them or steal them. So began the begging tour, and I have to tell you, the begging tour is where I stopped feeling anything like pity. He went to the Yang family, they fired crossbows at him, actual crossbows, off the manor wall, thunk-thunk into the gravel by his feet. Off our land, doctor, Master Sun sends his regards. He went to the Song family, and the Fengs, not to be outdone, also had crossbows and better aim. He went to a supplier, Manager Fan, who threw him bodily into the street. You offended Master Sun. I have children, doctor. I'm not going into the ground holding your hand. He went to Manager Zhu, a woman who'd once had a real soft spot for him, and he was desperate enough to offer her the only thing he had left to offer, which was himself. She looked at him for a long moment. You could see her remembering the man he'd been a month ago, and then she threw him out too, because a soft spot is no match for the kind of terror the name Sun now carried in this city. Every door in Zhongcheng, and behind every door a person more frightened of my subordinate than sorry for the protagonist. That's what it looks like when a man loses the whole board. Not a battle, just a long afternoon of locks. Then Ma Meiling called him one last time. She offered him 10,000 yuan, farewell money, get out of town money, and told him to never contact her again. And Fan Hao, who had decided somewhere in the last week that all of this was a conspiracy that could be reversed if he just found the lever, told her his real plan. He had a mole. A man named Wu Jin, planted deep in the Chung family's operations, quietly bleeding my assets out from the inside. He was going to strip me the way I'd stripped him, and then he'd be back. Ma Meiling hung up on him and immediately called me to warn me. I want you to sit with that for a second. The protagonist's own love interest, the woman the story had built for him, calling the villain to protect him. That's how far the ground had moved. I thanked her, told her not to worry, and asked her to have dinner with me again on Friday. She said yes before I finished the sentence. Then I went to go find Wu Jin, who was, as it happened, already tied to a chair in my basement. But that's the next part. Fan Hao came to my villa that night wearing the expression of a man about to enjoy himself. He'd worked out, he thought, the shape of the trap. He had his mole. He stood in my hall and told me, with real relish, that Wu Jin had been quietly transferring my family's holdings for days, that I was hollow, that the great Cheng Wei was about to find out he owned nothing at all. You mean this Wu Jin? I said, and Steward Zhang, on cue, wheeled the man out, tied to an office chair, gagged, blinking in the light. He'd been in my basement since roughly the moment Fan Hao recruited him, because a mole only works if the ground doesn't already know he's there. Something happened to Fan Hao then. His skin flushed, his hair lifted, and a raw pressure rolled off him. He'd finally broken through, become a real martial artist, hard flesh and fast hands, no more dying to a knife in a garage. Under different management, this would have been his big turnaround scene. He'd fought so hard for it. I let him have his moment. Then I took out the rejuvenation pill I'd extorted from him at the birthday and rolled it across my palm, where he could see it, and I said, "By the way, you've met my friend Little Sun." He stared at the pill. "That's not... How do you have that?" "Sun gave it to me, at the birthday. You handed it to him yourself." I closed my hand around it. "Little Sun, chairman of the whole God of Wealth machine that's been strangling your family since the day you woke up special. Every door that shut on you, he shut. Every family that wouldn't take your call, he called them first. He works for me. He's worked for me the whole month. You've been at war with a man you never once met." I smiled. "Hi." You could hear it land. The God of Wealth. The man who had personally, methodically dismantled his entire life. Mine. Had been mine the whole time. Fan Hao's new martial artist confidence drained out through his shoes, and into the silence walked two men I'd hired for exactly this, martial masters, a full rank above him, calm and unbothered, and they took him apart, shattered both his arms, put him down on my nice floor, and when he stopped moving, they went through his clothes and took the little porcelain bottle off him, the resurrection bottle, his safety net. Ding. 7,000. Except the bottle had one flicker left. It cracked in the man's hand, and a thread of that not quite light poured back into Fan Hao, and he gasped alive again. And this is where I learned what that tattoo did. The character on his arm flared crimson, a blood escape technique, and it burned his own life force for a burst of impossible speed, and he was through my door and gone before the two masters could close their hands. He didn't get far before Ma Meiling found him. She'd come to see the end, and she gave him the only thing she had left to give, which was the truth. She told him she'd known who I was from the beginning. That every cold word, every thrown glass, every farewell had been her holding an umbrella over his stupid head while he cursed the rain. And then, because he still didn't get it, because he was already opening his mouth to forgive her, she told him the rest. That between the two of us, he was the trash. That he'd been handed the whole world and had lost it in a month to a man who'd started the month with nothing. And she was done. It was over. It had never really begun. Ding. 2,000 more. Gone all at once. 5,000 now. Because a protagonist woman turning her back on him for good is worth 3 gift packs, it turns out, and the system chimed almost tenderly. The two masters caught him again and killed him again, and the tattoo spent its very last charge, one final crimson surge, resurrection, and speed together, and flung him out into the night half dead and completely spent. And that should have been the end of Fan Hao. It wasn't, because a rainbow tore across the sky. That's the only way I can describe it. A line of chi, sharp enough to split the dark, and a figure came down it and scooped the dying protagonist up and was gone. Someone strong. Someone a whole tier above the masters I'd hired, a great grandmaster, the system supplied helpfully, and a fast one. Fan Hao had found himself a bigger backer at the exact bottom of his luck, the way protagonists do, which was fine, because I'd been saving up 6 fate fragments. I fed them to the system, and it built me something at last, not a subordinate with money this time, but one with fists. Fan Long, a great grandmaster of the middle stage, master of the Thunder Martial Arts Hall over in Huacheng, a man of genuine standing in the martial world, and more than that, the identity that came bolted to him. In the world's new memory, I was Fan Long's own honored teacher, and the power that came with the title lifted me in one breath to the peak of the Grandmaster realm. I stood up in my study a real martial artist for the first time, chi humming in my own bones instead of borrowed out of a bottle, the floor a little farther from my head than it used to be, the whole world suddenly a thing I could push against and feel pushback. It felt, I won't lie to you, fantastic. I'd spent the first stretch of this life handing out other men's strength like a bank teller counting someone else's money. Now I had my own, and I finally understood why the protagonists always got so drunk on the first taste of it. The difference between them and me was that I didn't intend to get drunk. I intended to spend it. Fan Long arrived the next morning weeping. Openly, gratefully weeping, a mountain of a man with a face like a cliff, dropping to his knees on my floor with his grand disciple Guo Ping and a whole retinue of hall disciples behind him, all of them calling me master, all of them kowtowing to a young man most of them had never met. Steward Zhang, who had almost gotten used to Sun, came around the corner, saw a great grandmaster prostrate in the foyer, and went back to his special place with the frozen face and the open mouth. I was starting to worry about him, genuinely. I gave them pills, rejuvenation pills, promotion pills, the sort of thing the system spits out like loose change and that these hardened martial masters received like holy relics, hands shaking. And I gave them a job, find Fan Hao. And find the great grandmaster who'd carried him off, because a backer like that was a loose thread, and I have never in either life been able to leave a loose thread alone. Fan put 2,000 disciples on the streets, Sun paid for the cars, and the whole apparatus of my ridiculous new life turned together toward one broken man hiding somewhere in the city. Fan Hao woke up in a shabby apartment in an old district, alive against all odds, and looked up into the face of the man who'd caught him out of the sky. His name was Ma Kai, and he was exactly the kind of ally a protagonist gets at the bottom. A former leader of the Zhangcheng Merchant Alliance, a great grandmaster of the early stage, laid low and quietly rebuilding his strength for 6 months toward a comeback, and, conveniently, the grandfather of a girl named Ma Shuying, whom Fan Hao had once saved back when he was still winning. Fate ties bows like that. Ma Kai had a granddaughter who owed the boy her life and an old grudge against everyone currently sitting on top of the city, and he made Fan Hao an offer. Help me take back the Merchant Alliance, and together we'll put Qing Wei and that dog Sun in the ground. Fan Hao said yes, obviously, and then he climbed into a barrel of low-grade medicinal soup and screamed his way to a breakthrough, because that's the price of the next rank, and by the end of it, he was a martial master with a master's cause and a fresh reason to live. Good for him. I mean that. A protagonist with nothing to lose and a new mentor is exactly the kind of protagonist worth harvesting, and I already knew how I wanted to do it. I threw a party. Specifically, I broke ground on the commercial street development, the same golden project I'd been dangling in front of every noble family in town, and I turned the groundbreaking into a gala. And I put the whole thing on live television, citywide, prime time. I did this for one reason, which the system found deeply satisfying to explain to itself. I could farm Fan Hao without being anywhere near him. Every humiliation I broadcast, he'd watch, because a man like that cannot look away from the party he's been thrown out of. And every time his heart cracked in his shabby apartment, I'd get paid from across the city in my sleep. I invited Ma Meiling as my companion for the evening. She wore something that made the cameras forget their jobs, and she was, I think, genuinely happy, which was a strange and not unwelcome thing to be responsible for. The gala itself was a small massacre of protagonist dignity conducted entirely through good manners. Yang Lihua was there, the richest man's granddaughter, recovered and radiant, and steered toward me by a grandfather with a gleam in his eye, and she asked me to dance. So did Ma Meiling. I danced with both, Ma first, and the system, which apparently has strong opinions about romance, showered me with dance skill rewards mid-step, chiming steal the protagonist's woman like a proud aunt. I have never claimed my life made sense. And then the doors opened for the last guest, and the room went quiet, because a woman came in dressed head to toe in red, Wen Qing, of the Wen family, one of the 4 great families of the provincial capital, money and power on a scale that made the Jiangcheng nobles look like a neighborhood association. She hadn't been invited. She'd invited herself, having heard there was a young man in Jiangcheng worth knowing, and to make her interest unmistakable, she announced, in front of the cameras, that her family's construction arm was withdrawing from the rival bid on my project. Just like that, a gift laid at my feet, worth more than everything the original Chengwei had ever owned. The system pinged a new alert in the corner of my eye, a note that a bigger fish than Fan Hao was beginning to move somewhere out in the province. But I filed that under later, because Wen Qing was crossing the floor in red and the whole city was watching. Across town, in a barrel of cold soup, Fan Hao watched it too. He watched Ma Meiling laugh in my arms on live television, and something in his chest gave way, and he coughed blood into the water. Ding. 4,000. He'd survive it. He'd tell himself it was fuel. But I'd learned something useful from the broadcast, watching my disciples' reports come in against the timing of his collapse. My target had electricity, and a television, and a signal. Fan Long took that and drew a smaller circle on the map. The net was tightening. And out past the edge of it, past Fan Hao and his medicinal baths and his borrowed grandfather, the bigger fish the system had warned me about had just bought a plane ticket home. The bigger fish had a name now, Deng Qiang. And where Fan Hao was a genius doctor who thought he was a hero, Deng Qiang was the real article, the Dragon King, the prison king of Demon Island, a man who by the surface reading was a peak great grandmaster, but who, the system warned me, carried a coat lined with trump cards. 36,000 Destiny Halo, nearly double what Fan Hao had started with. He and Fan Hao shared a master, an old divine doctor, and that master had died, killed, in the world's backstory, by my own son and my own Fan, back before either of them was mine. So Deng Qiang was coming home to Jiangcheng in 3 to 15 days to collect a debt he thought was owed in blood, which was inconvenient because I hadn't finished with Fan Hao. Fan Hao, for his part, had cooked in enough medicinal soup to finally break through to martial master, and the breakthrough unlocked the thing under his skin, at last. Medical martial killing technique. The gentle healer's art turned inside out into a way to stop a heart with a touch. His halo ticked back up as his prospects brightened, 6,000, and he decided to announce his return with a bang. The Merchant Alliance held its annual dues conference, the whole city's chambers bringing in their fees, which in this world means medicinal herbs, a mountain of them in one building on one night. Fan Hao and Ma Kai planned to take the lot, and to open the evening, Fan Hao went after Chairman Zhao, the backer who'd abandoned him at the auction. He ran Zhao's car off the road, and he took the man's life on a live video call, one hand through the chest so that everyone patched into that call, watched Zhao stop mid-sentence and not get up. He wanted witnesses. He got them. He also got himself filmed committing a murder, but that detail was for later. Then he stormed the Alliance building to silence the people who'd seen his face, and it happened that Sun and I were inside, which was the whole reason I'd let the evening play out the way it did. Fan Hao came in fast and lethal, and the floor dropped out from under him. Literally, a trap sprung and a cage came down. I want to describe this cage properly because it became a recurring character in my life. It was a titanium alloy kennel, industrial grade, the kind you'd use to ship a very large and very angry dog. In fact, I'd borrowed it from a Tibetan Mastiff, and I had not had it cleaned, so it came down over the great Fan Hao, trailing an unmistakable reek of dog urine, and it held. A martial master, the pride of his fallen master's line, folded into a soiled dog cage in front of a room full of people. The system made a sound I can only describe as delighted. Ma Kai arrived to save him, and he arrived in style, carrying the severed head of Ding Dengqi, the current alliance leader, a great grandmaster, whom Ma Kai had killed on his way in to prove he'd come to rule. It was a genuinely intimidating entrance. It lasted about 4 seconds until Fan Long stepped out of the crowd. Middle stage against early stage is not a fight, it's a demonstration. Fan crushed him. Guo Ping mopped up the men he'd brought, and Ma Kai's comeback ended in the same building where it began. Fan Hao, still in his cage, still smelling of dog, played his last card. A poisoned needle flicked at me through the bars. A healer's murder in a slotted delivery. My chi answered it before I decided to. That Grandmaster Peak reflex. A shimmer of it turning the needle aside. And then I let the room see what I was. I opened my own aura, and Fan Long dropped to his knees and called me master where everyone could hear, and the truth of it rearranged every face in the room. The arrogant Chung boy was a great Grandmaster's honored teacher. Had been the whole time. That broke the last thing in Fan Hao that could break. His destiny halo, which had clawed all the way back to 6,000 on hope and hate, went to 0 all at once, and the system told me, almost solemnly, that his protagonist status was gone. Permanently. He would never again be the main character of anything. 23 gift packs rained down out of the ceiling of my vision, the biggest haul I'd had. There, I told the window. Clean, efficient, no fuss. Host. The system sounded genuinely wounded. Do you have any idea how much long-term income you just liquidated? A protagonist that size could have funded a year of proper, savored torment. You cashed him out in 6 weeks, and I'll do the exact same thing to the next one. I know. That's the part that worries me. I'd broken something in that little blue window back on the first night, I think, permanently, and it had settled since into a kind of resigned dread that I'd come to find deeply companionable. Fan severed Ma Kai's meridians, and Guo finished it, and the police, real police, ordinary and unimpressed, collected Fan Hao for the murder of Chairman Zhao, which had been so thoughtfully recorded. They took him away in handcuffs, and somewhere between the cage and the cell, his mind simply stopped keeping up, and the genius doctor who was going to inherit the world went quiet and stayed quiet. I almost felt something. Almost. Then Deng Qiang came home, and I remembered what a real monster looks like. He couldn't reach Fan Hao in prison, so he went to Wang Zheng, head of the Wang family, a man with the connections to spring a prisoner. Wang Zheng hesitated, reasonably, carefully, the way a sane man hesitates when a stranger asks him to break someone out of jail, and Deng Qiang answered the hesitation by erasing the Wang family, all of them. 100 people and more, an entire clan gone in a night, as a message written to the whole city in a language it couldn't misread. I won't walk you through the rooms of that house. I saw the aftermath, and it was the kind of thing that reminds you these stories only look like comedy from the winning side. Deng Qiang wanted Jiang Qing to understand that the Dragon King had returned and that the cost of telling him no was everything you had. He pulled Fan Hao out of his cell, a hollow, staring husk of a man now, no protagonist left in him at all, stashed him somewhere safe, and issued his terms. Every chamber in the city would pay tribute directly to him. The merchant alliance would be dissolved, and anyone who preferred the old arrangement was welcome to end up like the Wang family. I listened to the whole speech secondhand, over dinner, and I want to tell you I was afraid. I wasn't, quite, because I'd already opened those 23 gift packs and I knew what was sitting in them, but I respected it. Fan Hao had been a boy who thought he was a hero. This was a man who knew exactly what he was and had made peace with it long ago, and men like that don't rattle and don't bluff and don't stop. If I was going to take him apart, I was going to have to be worse than he was, in the specific way that the winner is always a little worse than he lets himself notice. Good thing I had 23 gift packs to open. 23 gift packs gave me 7 fate fragments, and 7 fragments gave me my next hire, and my next hire changed the weather. He Xiang, head of the He family, one of the 4 great families of the provincial capital, real old power, the kind of name Wen Qing's people said with respect, a martial king of the initial stage, which was a whole realm above anything walking around Jiangqing, and the identity that clamped onto me this time was the best yet. In the world's memory, I was the He family's benefactor, a level 2 alchemist who had once saved their entire line, a man they had honored at a private altar every month for years because they believed I was dead. The power that came with it lifted me to the middle stage of the martial king realm and put alchemy in my hands, which meant I could now cook the miracles I'd been handing out. I'd gone, in a matter of weeks, from a boy holding 2,000 yuan on a marble floor to a martial king who could brew life in a furnace. My life did not make sense. I'd stopped needing it to. But my favorite thing to come out of that stretch wasn't the rank, it was the wood. Here's what happened. Deng Qiang had an opportunity waiting for him. The system showed me a piece of green divine wood hidden in an old tomb, a genuine treasure that would have done him a great deal of good. So before he got there, I went and swapped it. I took out the green divine wood and I left in its place a piece of lightning summoning wood, and I set it to a very specific trigger. Deng Qiang found the tomb, found the treasure, and being Deng Qiang, he didn't examine it too closely. He took it for a cultivation method and forced it into his body. And the wood did what lightning wood does. It called down the sky, on him. Indoors, outdoors, mid-sentence, it did not care. And the trigger I'd set, the phrase that summoned it every single time, was my own name. So from that day, whenever Deng Qiang said Cheng Wei out loud, in a threat, in a curse, in a quiet vow of revenge at his own dinner table, the heavens opened and dropped a bolt directly onto the prison king of Demon Island. He'd lose cultivation, he'd cough blood, he'd stand there smoking. And because he was a proud man in front of frightened followers, he could never once acknowledge what everyone could plainly see, which was that the universe personally electrocuted him whenever he mentioned a certain someone. He took to calling me that man. It didn't always work. The wood was not fooled by pronouns as often as he'd have liked. Yixiang came to my villa weeping, of course. They all wept. I'd stopped being surprised by it, and Steward Zhang had quietly started keeping a jar of good tea and a box of tissues by the front door for the steady traffic of world-shaking martial artists who kept arriving to sob on our floor and call the young master. He brought his whole family, and I broke his years-long bottleneck with a single Martial King promotion pill and watched him ascend to the middle stage on my carpet. I gave the green divine wood, the real one, the one I'd stolen out from under Deng Qiang, to his son, He Jun, a serious young man who'd go on to be one of my most reliable fists. I gave pills to everyone down to the granddaughter, He Kuiying, who took hers with both hands and then looked at me in a way I was going to have to deal with eventually. Fan and Guo got their share and climbed a rank each. My little household of the world's most powerful weeping men grew by a whole family that afternoon. Deng Qiang, meanwhile, held his grand tribute gathering at the Wang Manor. Yes, that Wang Manor, the one he'd emptied, receiving the city's frightened businessmen in a house that still remembered what he'd done to it. He wanted 70% of everything and a signature on a contract and the memory of the dead to keep everyone honest. And Fan Long and Guo Ping walked into the middle of it and killed the 9th and the 10th of Deng Qiang's 10 villains, his named lieutenants, and put the Merchant Alliance back together before the ink on his contracts had dried. Ding and ding. His halo slipped from 36 toward the low 30s, one loss at a time, his lieutenants gone, his jade scheme faltering, and the lightning taking its regular tithe. That evening, I was at a hot spring, because a Martial King benefactor with a household full of grateful families has to relax somehow. Ma Meiling came to tell me she'd resigned from Jihui to join Sun's Taihei capital, which was her way of formally coming over to my side of the board, and I told her I was glad, and meant it. And He Kuiying, the granddaughter, appeared at my shoulder to offer me a massage, and Ma Meiling's temperature dropped about 10 degrees, and I understood that I had acquired, along with the Martial King realm and the alchemy and the electrified enemy, a second front I was not remotely qualified to manage. I closed my eyes and let the water do its work, and decided that of all the problems in my ridiculous new life, 2 women being territorial in a hot spring was the one I was least sorry to have. Deng Qiang decided the way to hurt me was to hurt Sun, so he went to Huacheng to take the jade trade, Sun's crown jewel, a near monopoly on the stones that half the province's wealth ran through. He had a prison connection for it, a shadowy Mr. Gao who controlled the supply corridor, and it was a smart play. It would have worked on a normal rich man. But Sun, on my say-so, quietly went and locked up the operating rights to the actual mine, which as luck and the system would have, it was owned by the He family, which is to say by me. Deng Qiang seized a river, and I owned the spring. His jade company hollowed out inside a week, and then his master craftsman looked at the flawless jade artifacts I'd been handing out like party favors, system junk, each one a lifetime masterpiece to a real carver, and they walked out his door and into mine. Then there was the matter of his girlfriend. Deng Qiang, terror of Demon Island, had an online girlfriend. A sweet secret thing he'd never met in person. A girl named Gao Ting, who as it happened was the heiress of the Gao family of Deng City and carried a splitting affliction, 2 selves and a migraine that would have leveled a smaller person. She was Deng Qiang's fated soft place, the warmth waiting for him at the end of his revenge. So I got there first. I made an account, the handle translated to something like Flower City's handsome boy, and I refused to apologize for it, and I did the one thing Deng Qiang never could, which was actually cure her. A pill, a bath steeped in a particular rose, and the headache that had haunted her whole life simply stopped. Deng Qiang, meanwhile, opened his chat one evening to find that his gentle Ting had been swapped, by my hacker, for a large gentleman named Ru Hua. Burly, hairy, aggressively affectionate. Ru Hua sent Deng Qiang selfies. Ru Hua sent Deng Qiang hearts. Ru Hua sent Deng Qiang a good morning message every single day that read, more or less, thinking of you, tiger. The Dragon King of Demon Island, terror of the lake, blocked, deleted, and, I like to imagine, sat very still for a while, reconsidering the entire trajectory of his life. He never did find out where his girlfriend went. She went to me, is where. When Gao Ting's cure took hold, her second self woke up too. A cool, aloof, dangerous personality who happened to be a combat-capable martial king in her own right. And both of her decided they'd quite like to meet the mysterious benefactor who'd fixed a lifetime of pain in an afternoon. While all this was happening, Deng Qiang was still gamely trying to strangle Sun. He leaned on every prison contact he had, got the banks to freeze on Sun, got a real estate boss named Yang to refuse him, got equipment and material suppliers to demand 10 times the price or nothing. For about a day, it even looked like pressure. So I held a business meeting, and I flipped every one of them at the table, one after another, with garbage. The equipment boss Wen wanted out from under Deng Qiang. I slid him a patent, a real one, worth a company, and he was mine before the tea cooled. Boss Yang, the real estate man, had a personal problem, the kind men don't discuss, the kind that had quietly ruled his marriage and his temper for years. I diagnosed it out loud in front of the whole table with a doctor's flat courtesy. Kidney deficiency, chronic. Explains the fatigue, the short fuse, and the other thing. Yang went the color of a stop sign. Then I produced the pill that fixed it, pressed it into his hand, and Boss Yang, so grateful and so thoroughly, publicly exposed in the same breath, squatted right down on the meeting room floor and swore fealty like a man who'd found religion over lunch. The rest of them watched a titan of real estate crouch and pledge himself for a single pill, and the promise of a good night every night did the work on the others. Deng Qiang's whole coalition changed sides between the appetizer and the check, and none of it cost me anything I couldn't pull out of a pack. Gao Ting arrived not long after, offering the Gao family's jade to shore up whatever Deng Qiang had rattled, and asking for my help getting some Huacheng Spring treasure she'd heard about. Deng Qiang's opportunity, naturally, though she didn't know that either. She was careful not to mention how powerful her family was, in that transparent way of a rich girl trying to be liked for herself. It was almost sweet. I let her keep the secret and made a note of the treasure. Deng Qiang found out about all of it at once, at his own victory banquet. At the exact moment he stood to make a toast about the men who'd pledged him their loyalty, none of whom were still in the room, and in his fury he made the mistake he always made. He named me, out loud, indoors. The ceiling did not save him. The lightning came down through the roof of the banquet hall and found him at the head of the table, and his guests scattered screaming into the night, and by morning half of Huacheng had decided that the Dragon King was cursed, that heaven itself was punishing him for what he'd done to the Wang family, and that the safest thing a person could do was be somewhere else. His cultivation dropped a full stage. He stood alone in a smoking banquet hall, and he did not say my name again for a while. Deng Qiang decided he needed a real prize, something big enough to turn the whole game around, so he planned a heist. 2 prizes, actually. His late father had hidden a treasure a decade ago, a water droplet stone, a thing that granted a kind of immortality, endless resurrections from a single seed of it, and there was, on top of that, a heaven and earth medicinal field guarded by his 3 strongest lieutenants. He gathered the survivors of his 10 villains, the 4th through the 8th, and he made them beautiful promises about the wealth they'd all share, and every one of those promises was a lie he expected them to die before they could collect on. The system handed me the location before Deng Qiang finished his speech. The water droplet stone was in the rockery spring of the Sui family manor, planted there 10 years back, and the window to reach it was the full moon banquet the Sui family was throwing for their eldest daughter. There was a bonus too, a chi-nurturing stone tucked inside a jade in old Sui's study, so I went to the banquet. I got there ahead of Deng Qiang's whole plan, which mostly consisted of walking up to old Master Sui Zhengtang and curing the stomach ailment that Deng Qiang had been intending to cure as his way in. I even used the lines Deng Qiang was going to use, which the system had thoughtfully provided, so that when Deng Qiang finally delivered them, they'd sound like a bad cover of a song everyone had already heard. I pocketed the jade, I got the chi stone, and then, instead of quietly grabbing the water droplet stone and leaving, I did something I'm a little proud of. I had chairs brought out, rows of them, arranged around the rockery, and I invited the hundreds of banquet guests to please take a seat, there's going to be a show. And there was. Because down in the rockery spring, not knowing the whole party was now an audience, Deng Qiang was in the middle of his heist, and he came up out of that ornamental pond on his hands and knees, soaked, filthy, clutching his father's water droplet stone and a companion heartstone, scrabbling over the fake mountain like a monkey who'd lost a bet. He surfaced into applause. He froze there on all fours, pondweed in his hair, a legendary treasure clutched in each fist, blinking at 300 of the province's finest in evening dress, all of them seated, all of them looking at him. I stood and raised my glass. A hand for our guest. He's just recovered the item for me, and while we've got him, I gestured at the dripping figure on the rockery. This is the thief who's been robbing the whole region. Do get a good look. You may want to recognize him later. And so the Prison King, the Dragon King, the terror of Demon Island, had to turn and flee a garden party on foot while 300 people pointed and the string quartet, bless them, kept right on playing. 4 of us went after him, me, Heixiang, Gao Ting, and her bodyguard. 4 martial kings against one who'd just been publicly reduced to a pond animal. He threw his 5 remaining lieutenants at us as cannon fodder, exactly as he'd always planned to, and Heixiang went through all 5 without breaking stride. Deng Qiang ran out of shields and out of room, and I unrolled a little parchment, a dream treasure, one of my favorite toys, and the world went soft and strange around him, and while he stood there dazed, the titanium dog cage came down out of the sky one more time. Yes, the same cage. I'd had it shipped from Jiangcheng. I had not, once again, had it cleaned. Deng Qiang joined the exclusive club of men who have contemplated their revenge from inside a mastiff's kennel, and the smell alone told him exactly how seriously the universe was taking him. Then, I tested the immortality. I want to be careful how I say this because it wasn't noble, and I knew it wasn't. Deng Qiang had a stone that brought him back from death over and over, and I wanted to know its limit, so I found it. A pebble, flicked at martial king speed, was enough to end him. The stone hauled him back. I ended him again. Back again. Heixiang took a turn. Each time the light of the stone came a little slower. It is a strange thing to watch a man die and get up and die and get up, and stranger to be the reason, and I'll only say that I didn't laugh because a man coming back to life is not a corpse and not a joke, and there's a line even I try to keep on the winning side of. When the stone had given nearly everything it had, I took it. And the heartstone with it, which I gave to Gao Ting, and it finished what my cure had started, knitting her 2 selves into one whole person at last, and his little porcelain bottle for the collection. He named me during all this, of course, more than once, and the sky obliged. The 3rd and biggest lightning strike I ever arranged for Deng Qiang came down right there, and his destiny halo, which had started at 36,000, went into free fall, through the 20s, past 10, down to 9, and his cultivation collapsed all the way back to the middle stage of Great Grandmaster. Only the last charge of his own medicine tattoo kept him breathing at all. He asked me who I was, through split lips, from the bottom of the dog cage. He'd earned an answer, I suppose. Who are you? What are you? Why me? What did I ever do to you? I'm your godfather, I told him. He stared. My what? Guess. And I left it exactly there, because a man will gnaw on a riddle far longer and far more thoroughly than I ever could be bothered to. And Deng Qiang had a very active imagination and a great deal of quiet time coming to use it in. Then I opened 18 more gift packs, 2 more fragments, a pile of grade 4 herbs, and enough alchemical grade to start mass-producing the little porcelain life bottles myself, so I made a batch, and I gave one to every single person who worked for me. Sun, Fan, Guo, Heixiang, Heijun, even He Kuiying. If Deng Qiang had taught me anything, it was that a resurrection in your pocket is a nice thing to have, and unlike him, I could afford to hand them out like candy. Deng Qiang still had the heaven and earth medicinal field on his list, 1 grade 5 herb and 5 grade 4 ones, enough to push him up to the late stage of Martial King and back into the fight. The field announced itself the way great treasures do in this world, with a rainbow over the water, this one hanging above Bird Island out on Forbidden Lake, near enough to Demon Island that Deng Qiang could call in favors. Thousands of Huacheng's martial artists converged on the lake in a single afternoon, and Deng Qiang's last 3 lieutenants plus a detachment of Demon Island's prison guards, loaned by his godfather, a name I'd hear more about soon, Hu Wen, set up in the shallows to hold the approach. I didn't feel like negotiating a landing, so I rammed the guard ship, drove my boat straight into theirs, stepped across, and put the 2 early-stage martial kings running it into the water. The guards decided, sensibly, that whoever this was outranked their loyalty to Deng Qiang, and retreated, and the crowd flooded onto the island behind me like a tide. Then, rather than crawl around a haunted island hunting for a hidden field, I took out my parchment again. The dream it spun was a good one. Deng Qiang and his 3 lieutenants stood frozen at the island's edge, eyes open, seeing none of it, while inside their heads they lived a glorious afternoon. They found the field, they harvested every herb. Deng Qiang broke through in a pillar of light, and he hunted me down and finally, killed me. It must have felt wonderful. I know it did because the dream ran through their minds where I could read it, and while they were busy triumphing over me in their sleep, I followed the map their own hopes were drawing and walked straight to the real field. Deng Qiang came out of the dream to find the parchment hanging in the sky like a second moon and the medicinal field already bare dirt. I'd eaten the grade 5 herb on the spot, middle to late to the very peak of Martial King in a rush of heat that flattened the grass, and handed the 4 grade 4 herbs to my people. Fan had spent the afternoon quietly informing the 800 treasure hunters on the island that Bird Island was Deng Qiang's personal territory, and he'd be very cross to find them poaching, so by the time Deng Qiang surfaced, the entire mob turned on him at once. He talked 300 of them back to his side because he was still, genuinely, a formidable and persuasive man. It bought him nothing. By the time he'd fought free of his own admirers, the field had been plowed under for an hour. The last insult was He Jun. Somewhere in the scramble, the boy broke through to the middle stage of Martial King, powered by a piece of green divine wood, and Deng Qiang recognized it because it was his green divine wood, the treasure I'd swapped for lightning at the tomb, now blooming in a rival's hands. He understood in that moment exactly how long and how thoroughly he'd been robbed. He threw his last 3 lieutenants at He Jun as cover, and when those were spent, the prison king of Demon Island did the only thing left to a man with no shields and no treasures and a whole island trying to mug him. He hid in a pigsty. I'm told the sows were very welcoming. They nuzzled him. He lay there in the muck of it, holding his breath, a man who'd emptied a 100-person manor to announce his return, now praying that 800 bounty hunters would run past the smell. He resolved in the filth on a new plan: get the water droplet stone back, flee to his godfather Hou Wen for shelter, and above all avoid the one person even Deng Qiang was afraid of, a prodigy brother he never named without lowering his voice. His halo slid from 7,000 to 5 while he lay there deciding it. Somewhere overhead, a rainbow was fading, and a pig was, I'm choosing to believe, judging him. Broke and desperate, Deng Qiang tried to sell his real estate company for cultivation money and discovered that in the city I ran, nobody would buy a thing he was selling, so Sun bought it, the whole company, at 60 cents on the dollar, and then knocked off another 20% because Deng Qiang was too frightened of He Jun to show up and sign in person and had to do it remotely. Deng Qiang hung up, convinced he'd put one over on me by walking away with cash. He'd sold a company worth a fortune for pocket change to the man he was trying to ruin and felt clever about it. I've noticed that's a very specific talent protagonists have. He used the cash to lean on a childhood friend, Gao Song, a soft, decent young man of the Gao family, herb suppliers, and squeezed him for grade 4 herbs until he'd clawed back to the initial stage of Martial King. When the Gao patriarch, Gao Ming, learned his son had sold to the man the whole province was blacklisting, he brought the boy to my manor and whipped him bloody in my courtyard as an apology. I stopped it before it went too far. I'm not a monster about the wrong things, and settled for banning the Gao family from the herb trade for 5 years. The lesson took. It always did. Word gets around fast when helping the protagonist costs a family its livelihood. Then Deng Qiang decided to rob me. The plan was to break into my manor while I was safely away at a banquet, crack my safe, and reclaim the water droplet stone and his porcelain bottle. It was a good plan, in the sense that it was exactly the plan I wanted him to have. I wasn't at any banquet. I'd wired the manor with hundreds of hidden cameras and arranged a live broadcast to all of Huacheng, complete with 2 commentators, actual broadcast professionals, set up to narrate the evening's entertainment. The safe was a decoy, empty. The stone he was after wasn't even in the building. The heartstone he'd have loved to grab was around Gao Ting's neck, and Gao Ting was watching the stream with everyone else. Deng Qiang slipped over my wall like a shadow, cracked the decoy safe with real skill, and turned around holding nothing into a floodlight and a crowd. They'd all gathered on and around the wall while he worked, the whole city, more or less, and the commentators were describing his technique in appreciative tones as he realized. He tried to salvage it the only way he had left. He opened his mouth to tell Gao Ting the truth, that he was her lost online love, that the Flower City boy was the fraud. Ting, it's me. I'm the one you talk to every night. That account was. Her bodyguard kicked him off the wall. He climbed back up. Listen to me. The Flower City boy is a lie. I'm the real. Her cool second self, the Martial King one, put him back down into the dirt. Let him speak, someone in the crowd called generously, and Deng Qiang would haul himself up and draw the breath to expose me, and a boot would arrive right on the inhale every single time, until the whole wall was timing it and laughing and calling out let him speak just to watch the next boot land. In the end, he burned a one-use treasure, a radiant light that moved at martial emperor speed just to escape being kicked off a wall on live television, and the Gao family chased him into the dark trying to earn back my goodwill. That was the night Deng Qiang's real backer finally moved. His godfather, Hou Wen, a peak martial king, sent a man named Song Bo to pull Deng Qiang out of the Gao family's hands, and Song Bo did it the hard way, and I learned the shape of the thing behind Deng Qiang at last. The Winter Marshal's Mansion, a secret organization out on Forbidden Lake, whose whole purpose was to keep the horrors of Demon Island suppressed, founded generations ago by a legendary martial emperor. Hou Wen healed his godson, listened to the litany of his ruin, and vowed to make it right. Deng Qiang's halo had dwindled to 2,000 by then, but for the first time in a long while he had a wall at his back that could actually hold. So I knocked the wall down before he could lean on it. 6 fragments, and the system built me Hou Wen himself, the Godfather. The peak martial king who just sworn to avenge Deng Qiang became, in the rewriting of the world, my loyal servant, and the identity that came with him was the biggest leap I'd taken yet. I was the legendary founder of the Winter Marshal's Mansion, a first-tier legendary martial emperor. The man the whole organization had been built to honor for generations was me, and it lifted me clean out of the martial king realm into the martial emperor one, with a treasure to match. A thunder-containing gourd, a little bottle-shaped thing that could call down a martial emperor grade strike once a month. Deng Qiang's ultimate backer was now the throne I sat on. He just didn't know it yet. The system, meanwhile, was already looking past him. A new alert bloomed in the corner of my eye. Deng Qiang's own adopted younger brother, a peerless prodigy, carrier of some old man golden finger, the one relative Deng Qiang was afraid of, was on his way to Jiangnan province. His name was Wang Bai, and he was coming for the water droplet stone, and his destiny halo made Deng Qiang's look like a rounding error. I looked at the number, and I looked at my new gourd, and I thought, well, we're going to need more fragments. Hao Wen took his broken godson in and rebuilt him, fed him herbs back up to the middle stage of Martial King, handed him Demon Island guards and Winter Marshal's elites to command, and, because the old man believed his enemy was some jumped-up young alchemist, lent Deng Qiang the mansion's greatest treasure to finish the job, the thunder-containing gourd. My thunder-containing gourd, though nobody in that room knew it. Deng Qiang received it on both hands like a holy relic and swore to bring my head back in it. His halo climbed off the floor, up to 6,000, on borrowed strength and borrowed thunder. He couldn't even wait for morning. The night before his grand assault, he went out and hunted down the businessmen who'd defected to me, the ones who'd squatted and sworn fealty over pills, and he took his time with them, one by one, in the dark. I'll leave it there. Several men didn't see the next day, and he and Fan chased him across the city, but he was too fast and too willing, and there are parts of Deng Qiang's story I tell quickly on purpose. He was a genuinely dangerous man having the worst month of anyone's life, and cornered animals don't get gentler. At dawn, he surrounded my manor, 1,000 men at his back, the gourd in his fist pouring off a martial emperor pressure that flattened the gardens and turned the sky the color of a bruise. Inside, brave old Heisheng squared his shoulders and prepared to die, buying time for alchemist Chung to escape out the back, which was touching and unnecessary because I walked out the front. I strolled down my own steps into the teeth of a martial emperor aura with my hands in my pockets, and I told Deng Qiang, honestly, that he wasn't fit to carry my shoes. He took it as bravado. He uncorked the gourd. A dragon of black smoke roared out of it, all that stored martial emperor fury looking for something to crush, and it found me, and it stopped, and it changed its mind, because the gourd knew its master. It had always known its master. It curled up out of the killing smoke, shrank back down to its friendly little bottle shape, and flew across the courtyard to nuzzle into my hand like a dog that had been left at a kennel too long. Deng Qiang watched the martial emperor doomsday device his godfather had lent him to end me wag itself across the courtyard and settle happily into my palm. No, he said. No, that's the mansion's gourd. It doesn't answer to anyone, but why is it? Stop that. It knows its owner. I scratched it more or less. Dogs do. I kept it. I had a little house built for it by my front gate, and from then on my most fearsome treasure lived in a doghouse and watched the door, which I found deeply satisfying and Deng Qiang found difficult to process. He fled to Hao Wen to ask what the back door was, how you make the gourd behave like that, and Hao Wen went very quiet because Hao Wen knew the answer. Only one person could command the gourd that way, only the founder, so the old man mustered everything the Winter Marshal's mansion had, all 5 of his generals, the full weight of the order, and had Deng Qiang lead them to point out the enemy, and the whole province held its breath waiting for a war between martial emperors. There was no war. Hao Wen took one look at me standing in my doorway with the gourd asleep in its little house and the old man's legs folded. "Martial Lord," he breathed and put his forehead to the stone. Behind him, all 5 generals folded too, and their elites behind them, 100 warriors going down like wheat in a wind. "Welcome home, Martial Lord." Deng Qiang turned in a slow circle in the middle of all that kneeling, watching the most powerful people he knew press their faces to the ground toward the doorway he'd come to burn down. "No," he said. "No, Godfather. He's the enemy. He's the one I told you about. He is the founder, boy." Hao Wen didn't lift his head. "You've been raising your hand against the founder. Kneel." And so the prison king of Demon Island, the man who'd emptied a 100-person manor to announce his return, got down on his knees in my courtyard and called me Martial Lord, one dragged syllable at a time. I have rarely enjoyed a sentence more than I enjoyed hearing that one. Hao Wen, when he understood how thoroughly his own godson had been raising his hand against the founder, slapped Deng Qiang. Not once. For a good while, methodically, a grandfather's discipline turned all the way up and then sentenced him to 3 years kneeling in penance at the Cliff of Repentance, which I was given to understand was located directly downhill from the mansion's latrines, so that the penance came with a certain aroma. It was fitting. Dung Qiang had put me in a dog cage. The cliff put him downwind of a toilet for 3 years. The universe keeps a ledger. He didn't stay for it, of course. He tricked his guards on the first night and ran, a full and final break from the last people on Earth who'd shelter him, and his halo bottomed out at 1,000 as he went. He had 1 card left, and he hated it, and he played it anyway. He called his prodigy brother, Wang Bai, the relative he never named above a whisper. He'd hand over the water droplet stone, flee to the provincial capital, and come back a martial emperor to burn everything I'd built. That was the plan. I let him make the call. I wanted to meet the brother too. I told Hu Wen to go end it. The system showed me where Dung Qiang was hiding, a perfect paradise, the plot prompt called it, which turned out to be the very same pigsty because Dung Qiang's imagination for hiding places had contracted along with everything else about him. He crouched in the muck and called his prodigy brother, and I want to describe that phone call because it told me everything I needed to know about the man coming next. Dung Qiang begged, and it's the bleakest thing in this whole story, so I'll let you hear it. Little brother, Xinjun, I need you. Real trouble this time. I've got nothing left, please. You never had anything. Wang on the other end, bored to tears. You were the strongest thing I owned once, and you still lost it all to a second-generation nobody. Even as my dog, you were a disappointment. Just come, or send someone, anyone. I'll send someone for the water droplet stone. That's the only thing left on you worth the trip. And Wang Bai hung up on the prison king of Demon Island like he was declining a warranty call. He didn't care that his own brother was about to die. He cared about the immortality stone, and he sent a flunky to collect it off the body, the way you'd send an intern to pick up a package. I filed that away. A man who talks to his own brother like that is a man with a specific exploitable disease, and its name is the belief that talent is the only thing that makes a person real. Hao Wen's ambush and Wang's collector arrived at the pigsty at roughly the same time. Wang had sent a martial emperor hitman named Han Kui, and Han Kui came in hard, and the farmers who owned that pigsty, simple people who'd never done anything but keep pigs near the wrong hiding man, didn't survive the crossfire. That one sits with me. Not everything in my story is a punchline, and the people who die at the edges of these fights don't get halos or gift packs, they just get gone. Then the gourd woke up. My little watchdog stretched, called down its once-a-month martial emperor strike, and brought it down on Dung Qiang, and the prison king of Demon Island, Transmigrator, Dragon King, Terror of the Lake, did not get up. His destiny halo hit 0, and 25 gift packs rained down out of the sky, and the arc of the man who'd emptied a 100-person manor to announce his return ended in a pigsty under a borrowed sky. The system didn't say a word about lost income this time. Even it could tell this one wasn't funny. I didn't gloat. I'd learned by then that the loudest villains die quietly, and there's nothing to say over it. Han Kui was still on a video call with Wang Bai, showing off the corpse, when I stepped into frame. I ended Han Kui. A first-tier legendary martial emperor doesn't strain to swat a hitman, and then I picked up the phone and, because Wang had been so rude to his brother, I smashed it. Then, because I felt he hadn't fully absorbed the lesson, I smashed it again on the second call. Wang vowed revenge in the grand style and announced he'd start by slaughtering the He family, my He family, to make me feel it, which meant it was time to grow. I fed the system fragments and it built me my next servant, Du Jing, head of the Du family, a reclusive old clan that guarded the sacred altar ruins, the #1 ruins in the entire province. And the identity that came with him lifted me again, a 4th-rank legendary martial emperor now, mid-tier, a level where the men Wang considered strong were merely furniture. A golden dragon crossed the sky over the province when I broke through, and the whole region started hunting for the mysterious new mid-tier emperor who'd appeared from nowhere, not one of them guessing it was the arrogant Chung boy from Jiangcheng. Wang didn't wait to find me. He sent a martial emperor named Ma Chao to seize the Winter Marshal's mansion and its medicinal field, and Ma Chao took the place and put old Hu Wen through a hard afternoon. I'll say only that when I arrived, my martial lord's men needed a great deal of healing, and I had the pills to do it. I mended them all, and then I introduced Ma Chao to the difference between a martial emperor and a mid-tier legendary one, which is the difference between a candle and the thing you use a candle to look for in the dark. He didn't get a second exchange, and then I did the thing that had become my signature. I handed out treasures like a man clearing his pockets. Martial Emperor promotion pills, one after another, to Hao Wen and all 5 of his generals, and my entire honor guard climbed into the Martial Emperor realm in a single afternoon on what was, to me, spare change. Wang Bai wanted to make me feel the loss of the He family. I was building an army out of my garbage. We were not, it was becoming clear, playing the same game. Wang Bai did not come like Deng Qiang came. Deng Qiang had been a hurricane. Wang was a spreadsheet. He arrived in Jiangnan province with the calm of a man who'd never lost anything and couldn't conceive of it, and he went to work leeching the region's newly risen families the way a serious investor buys up distressed assets, coldly, thoroughly, with the fixed belief that talent was the only real currency and everyone poorer in it than him existed to be spent. While he set up, my board got better. Gao Ting went home to Dung City to take up her place as heir to the Gao family, a house so old and so high it made the four great families look like startups. Wen Qing brought her entire Wen family across the province to pledge themselves to me, all of them, formally, in red, because Wang had been squeezing their cousins and they'd rather stand behind the man Wang was afraid of. Even Wang's own mother, a formidable woman named Song Lan, took one look at the mysterious mid-tier emperor rumors and started thinking about me as a son-in-law, which is a sentence I still enjoy, and I learned the shape of the ladder I was climbing. Above the martial king came the martial emperor. And the martial emperor realm ran 10 tiers deep, and above all of it sat the word legendary, which the world used in a hush. Wang's opening move was to collect sacred canon fragments, pieces of a supreme technique, and he collected them the way he did everything, by taking them from the He and Wen families with menace, leaning on their elders until they gave up what he wanted. Then he carried his fragments to the Yang family, one of the 3 ancient inherited families, to trade them, and a stack of his personal cultivation notes for the Yang family's dragon legacy. A fair deal, by his lights. A prodigy paying in genius for more genius. I got to the Yang family first, because I always got there first, and this time I didn't even have to scheme, I just had to show up. The instant I let a thread of my aura show, the Sheng elders treated me like visiting royalty, sworn brother courtesy, the best seat in the house. And then I did the thing I'd learned annoyed the protagonists more than any clever trap, which was to be casually, insultingly generous. Wang wanted to trade fragments for 1 dragon legacy. I gave the Yang family 2 complete sacred cannons and a pair of martial emperor techniques on top, straight out of a gift pack, the way you tip a valet. To me, they were clutter. To an inherited family, they were the crown jewels of a dynasty. My only condition was that they turn Wang away, tear up every agreement he'd bullied out of the He and Wen families, and protect both houses going forward. They agreed before I'd finished the sentence, and when Wang arrived to make his grand trade, they threw his fragments back in his face and had him walked out. Wang didn't rage. That was the unsettling thing about him. He just recalculated and hid and watched, trying to work out who the mysterious VIP was. The system told me his trump card while he skulked. A piece of 3-body grass, a grade 6 herb whose 3 leaves were 3 resurrections. 3 lives in his pocket. Good to know how many I'd have to spend. He ambushed my convoy on the road, convinced I was only a 1st-tier legendary emperor, a rank he thought he could handle. I got out of the car. I want you to picture this as calmly as it happened, because that's how it landed on him. I walked up to the peerless prodigy of the provincial capital, and I slapped him, hard enough to kill. The first leaf of the 3-body grass flared and hauled him back, and I said, that one was for Ho Wen. I slapped him again, killed him again. The second leaf burned. That one was for his generals. And a third time, and the last leaf, his last spare life, guttered out on the road. And that one, I told him, was for the He family. 3 of his resurrections gone in 3 sentences, and Wang Bai stood there on wobbling legs, having died 3 times in under a minute, and understanding, for the first time in his charmed life, that he had walked into something that did not care how special he was. He fled, using the men he'd brought as shields, the way his brother used to. His destiny halo dropped from 40,000 to 28, and 11 gift packs fell out of the sky. More techniques, more cannons, more clutter to give away. I got back in the car. I hadn't even raised my voice. I was learning, the raised voice that these men fed on, and the surest way to starve a protagonist is to beat him like it's nothing at all. Wang investigated me the way he did everything, methodically, and arrived at exactly the wrong answer. A man who forged high-grade techniques, cured the incurable, commanded old families. That had to be some hidden elder, he decided. A 50 or 60-year-old master wearing a young face, which suited me fine, because it meant Wang crossed me off the guest list for the one event he actually cared about. The martial arts new star ranking, a youth-only contest whose first prize was obscene. An ancient site, a medicinal field, a mineral vein, and a full 10% of the province's economy. He thought no old alchemist could enter it, so he thought he'd already won it. First, he wanted a dragon crystal ore vein he'd sniffed out, and he was careful about it, careful enough to silence the one informant who knew the coordinates. But the Ding family, another of the inherited houses, had found the same vein, and the system told me the good part. Buried in it was a top-grade dragon crystal stone worth half the whole deposit. So I met the Ding Patriarch, Ding Fan, a 4th-rank emperor and a reasonable man, at the mouth of the vein. We agreed to split it 50-50. And then we sat down to tea and let the little laborer do the digging. The little laborer was Wang. Down in the shaft, hacking at rock by hand to avoid making noise, sweating out his genius one swing at a time, mining the prize for two men drinking tea at the entrance who intended to take all of it. He surfaced hours later, filthy and triumphant, holding the top-grade dragon crystal stone up to the light, and turned around into Ding Fan's grin and my open hand. Ding Fan asked him pleasantly, what gave a boy the right to sit at grown men's tables? I took the stone, and when Wang tried to bolt, I told him he could leave. He just had to take one palm on the way out. He took it. He survived it. Barely. By burning a treasure I didn't think much of at the time. A little bronze mirror his stepmother had given him for exactly this kind of emergency. It shattered, absorbing the blow. He coughed blood and ran, and I let him, and I noticed the mirror, and I filed it away with the other loose threads, not yet knowing it was the most important one in the whole story. Because the palm did what the system needed it to do, it left Wang severely injured, which was the precondition for his next stroke of protagonist luck. Half dead and fleeing, he stumbled into a 1,000-year-old tree, a living well of life force, the sort of miracle the universe drops in front of its favorites at their lowest. I let him harvest it. I even let his 3 shield men die, buying him the time to do it, since they were going to die anyway. Then I collected the tree's sap and poured it into Deng Chang's old water droplet stone, and the stone drank it and filled all the way up, from a few resurrections left in the tank to hundreds, and I brewed another whole batch of porcelain life bottles on top of that. I handed the fresh bottles out to every one of Ho Wen's generals. My people were, at this point, extremely hard to kill, entirely on Wang's dime. Wang lost 8 gift packs worth of luck in that one exchange. The Ding networking, the dragon crystal, his 3 men, the tree, and his halo slid from 28,000 to 20. He also, and this is the part that started to curdle in him, got paranoid. He decided there was a mole feeding me his movements, and he went home and interrogated his own loyal servants looking for the leak, which is a thing only a very particular kind of man does. There was no mole. There was just a system that whispered his future in my ear. But Wang couldn't imagine being outplayed by anything but betrayal, because betrayal at least implied he was worth betraying. His godfather stepped in then. Marquis Wang, a heavyweight who ran a shadowy outfit called the Dome Organization, proposed a truce brokered by the Du family, the most reclusive and respected clan around, the ones who guarded the province's #1 ruins. To buy their goodwill, the Marquis mortgaged the future, half of the Wang family medicinal field's next 5 years, half of Wang's own eventual new star ranking prize, and 5 martial emperor treasures up front as a deposit. It was an enormous sum, laid down to convince a neutral power to make me leave his godson alone. I want you to appreciate the position I was in when I heard about it. The Du family, whose favor Marquis Wang was bankrupting himself to buy, were my servants. Every one of them carried a life and death talisman I could trigger from across the province. Marquis Wang was spending a fortune to hire my own people to protect his son from me. I almost felt bad taking the money. Almost. I've told you already that I've stopped being able to leave a loose thread alone. It turns out I have the same problem with a free fortune walking into my house. Wang carried the Marquis's fortune to the Du family fortress, and on the way in, he had the kind of luck that would have told a humbler man to be afraid. The outer wall of the fortress was covered in old carved murals, cultivation diagrams, faded and strange, and Wang, reading them as he walked, broke through on the spot to the 3rd tier of martial emperor. He thought he'd found a sacred inheritance. What he'd actually found was my garbage. Those murals were scribbles my late master had left on the wall generations ago, rough drafts he judged defective and carved outside like a man doodling on a napkin. Wang ascended a whole tier reading a master's rejected notes and never once suspected the napkin had an owner. He met a Du branch elder, handed over the Marquis's enormous gift, and, as a sweetener, the coordinates of the Wang family's own medicinal field. Then I made a phone call. I want to describe what a phone call from me did to the Du family, because it's my favorite genre of scene. Du Jing, the head of the clan, and his 6 direct elders, every one of them a 3rd-tier martial emperor, everyone a figure the whole province feared, answered the call and burst into tears, openly, joyfully. The young lord has come out of seclusion, they wept to each other, because in the world's memory, I was the young lord of the Du family, and the Du family were mine down to the marrow. My master had founded their line. My master had discovered the sacred altar ruins they'd guarded for generations. Each of them carried a life and death talisman I could squeeze like a stress ball, and I told them gently to swallow every treasure Wang had just handed them, seize the medicinal field he'd so helpfully located for them, and put the boy out on the road, which they did. Wang stood in the Du courtyard watching the clan he'd come to hire turn on him, and when he protested, an elder asked him, with what I'm told was genuine confusion, whether he had really come here asking the Du family to mediate a quarrel between their own master and his servants. Wang didn't understand the question. He fled, robbed of the Marquise's fortune and his own medicinal field in a single afternoon, still not knowing that the young lord whose servants had just fleeced him was the Cheng Wei he'd sworn to flay. He worked it out eventually, alone, and it broke something. The arrogant Cheng boy from Jiangcheng was the young lord of the #1 clan in the province. For a man whose entire religion was that talent decided everything, it was a heresy he couldn't hold. But Wang was nothing if not resilient in the worst way, and instead of accepting it, he doubled down and set his sights on the legendary heart path. A trial that could make a man, a legendary martial emperor, able to punch above his tier, the same word the world used in a hush. And here, again, was the detail I kept almost noticing. The breast mirror that had saved his life from my palm, the treasures he leaned on, all came from his stepmother. A cold, quiet, beautiful woman in a wheelchair named Fan Lihua, her legs long since ruined, who gave the prodigy his best equipment and asked for nothing he could see. I didn't think much about her yet. I want to be honest about that. She was a line in a file, a footnote in the villain's logistics. I had no idea I'd spent a whole life looking for her. I arrived at the Du fortress in person not long after, and the entire clan went to its knees in the courtyard. Greetings, young lord, and my own driver, He Jun, watched a house of third-tier martial emperors kowtow to the boss he chauffeured, and drove home very fast to tell Hishang and Ho Wen, who fit this newest revelation into the growing legend of me with the weary acceptance of men who'd stopped being surprised. Ding Fan, the Ding patriarch, tracked me there too, and the instant he understood that his tea-drinking partner from the dragon vein was the young lord of the Du family, he did the sensible thing, groveled, pressed the top-grade dragon crystal stone and a pile of treasures into my hands, and walked away with a Du family partnership that would make the Ding house for a generation. I gave the Du family 60 or 70 complete secret manuals to hang on their walls in place of the master's defective murals, and turned the fortress into a training ground for the He family and the Winter Marshals. My garbage was by now a functioning economy. Somewhere out there, a heartbroken prodigy was climbing toward a heart trial, and somewhere closer than I knew, a woman in a wheelchair was waiting to find out if the man she'd crossed death for had finally come back. The sacred altar ruins were the real thing. The province's #1 ruins, a place where space itself had torn and healed wrong, where the pressure crushed lesser men to their knees at the entrance, and rare treasures hung in the dragon chi like fruit no one could reach. My master's family had guarded it for generations. I walked in like I owned it, because I did. My inherited resistance technique was the master's own, upgraded. His sheltered a man for 10 meters, mine covered 30. So while the province's finest clawed at the entrance on their hands and knees, flattened by a pressure that turned martial emperors into worms, I walked in under a 30-meter umbrella of calm, with the entire Du family strolling behind me like a tour group. Treasures hung in the dragon chi overhead, out of everyone's reach, everyone but the one man the pressure didn't touch. I plucked a cloud-splitting spear off the air, a mid-tier treasure with a sacred cannon folded into its making, the kind of weapon that beats a better weapon for the simple reason that it comes with its own instruction manual welded on. And my Thundergourd, my little gate dog, swallowed a floating ball of purple lightning down whole and belched, satisfied, and quietly leveled up. Everything I owned kept getting stronger by accident. Then the legendary heart path opened, and Wang saw his opening. The heart path was a waterfall you climbed against a blue mist that reached into you and pulled up your worst grief and made you live it, and the men who couldn't bear it fell, and falling meant failing. It was youth only, which meant I couldn't set foot on it. So Wang brought the top 10 rankers of the new starboard and set them on my 6, He Jun, and the 5 Winter Marshals generals, planning to drown my people in their own worst memories until they came out the far side as walking corpses. Clever, cruel, exactly his register. I couldn't climb the path, but I could fly over it. So I rode the Thundergourd up above the whole trial, and I took out a mirror of rewind, another toy from a pack, and I pointed it at Wang, and I played his grief back on the sky where the entire province could watch. You have to understand what the mirror showed, not staged accusations. His actual memories, the ones the heart path was already dredging, projected a mile high over the whole valley. Wang murdering his own subordinates when their usefulness ran out. Wang killing his own senior brother for a cultivation resource. Wang, as a boy, standing over his own parents. Every rung of the prodigy's flawless ascent was a body, and now the province could see them all, glowing in the sky above the sacred trial, and the beautiful, clean image of the peerless genius came apart in front of the people he'd spent his life impressing. His own followers looked up and stopped following. Even Marquis Wang, watching from afar, went quiet. Wang himself, halfway up the waterfall, looked up into a sky full of his own worst nights and made a sound I have never heard a proud man make. Not grief, panic. Because the one thing a talent supremacist cannot survive is being seen plainly, and I'd just shown the whole province the receipts. And here is where I finally started paying attention to the woman in the wheelchair, because the mirror pulled up the truth about Wang's golden finger too, and it wasn't a talent at all. It was her, Fan Lihua. His cold stepmother was a reincarnator, reborn out of a past life in which she'd been a 9th-rank martial emperor, a height almost no one in this world would ever touch, now trapped in a 5th-rank body with her legs ruined, feeding her genius stepson the treasures and the guidance that made him look like a chosen one. Wang's whole legend was a woman's leftovers. And the day she'd awakened into this life with her old memories intact, the first thing she'd done was kill Wang's father. So whatever else she was to that boy, she was not his and never had been. Wang couldn't let the sky keep showing his sins, so he abandoned the heart path, threw away his own shot at becoming a legendary emperor just to scramble down and stop the mirror. Which was the joke, because the mirror simply ran out of charge a moment later and would have stopped on its own. He traded his ascension to interrupt a show that was ending anyway. He fled, his image in ruins, and my 6 walked off the heart path unharmed, every one of them a legendary emperor now, tempered by their own grief and out the far side whole. Marquis Wang half believed his godson's frantic report and then delivered the piece of news that finished Wang's worldview off. He'd cross-checked every identity behind the mysterious power hunting them, the founder of the Winter Marshals, the benefactor of the Du family, the young lord of the Du family, and every thread pointed to the same person, and that person was not some hidden 60-year-old elder. He was a man barely into his 20s. Which meant, the Marquis said slowly, that this Cheng Wei could enter the new star ranking after all. The youth-only prize Wang had been counting on his whole campaign was suddenly a room with me standing in it. Wang found one ruin left that could save his ranking. The Fairness Relic, a Jing family ruin that opened for a single hour once every 3 years, and that did exactly what its name promised. Inside, everyone, no matter their true power, was suppressed down to the peak of Martial King, a place where a peak Martial King stood equal to a Martial Emperor. The one arena on Earth where Wang's tricks could beat my tears, because inside it there were no tears. He planned to grab 5 treasures there, break through to 4th rank, and take the new star crown. It was honestly his best idea in weeks, so naturally I ruined it by being polite. When the relic opened, the whole province stood aside to let me enter first. That's the kind of deference the young lord of the Du family gets now. And I went in early and unhurried, specifically so that Wang, watching me leave, would feel safe to slip in last with only 45 minutes left on the clock. Then I took my time. The relic was a maze of pools and traps that killed the careless, but I had the answer key from a plot prompt, so I strolled it like a garden and handed my people little maps. Step here, not there, the left pool, not the right, and my minions walked through a minefield picking flowers, while everyone else stood frozen at the edges, waiting for someone braver to clear the mines. Wang, to his credit, found 4 treasures on his own instincts. He was genuinely gifted. It just never once mattered. I caught up to him inside, and this was the moment I'd been looking forward to for weeks. Wang, suppressed to peak king like everyone else in the relic, felt strong for the first time in our whole acquaintance, because in here he thought we finally stood as equals. No hidden ranks in here, he said, and there was real joy in it. No young lord, no founder, no blood slaughter borrowed title. Just you and me, at the same height. Let's see what you actually are. He drew his finest secret manual to put me down, and I recognized it because it was the Du Stonewall manual, the defective one, the napkin I'd scribbled and discarded that he'd broken through on. I had the finished version in my bones, so I answered his best move with the same move done correctly, and it wasn't close. His technique met mine and simply lost, the way a rough draft loses to the final. His face flickered. He switched sacred cannons. I met the new one with the identical form, cleaner. He tried a third, a fourth, faster and more desperate, and every single one came back at him sharper than he'd thrown it, because my backstory had handed me every technique in the world at perfect mastery, and his had handed him my rejected drafts. That's mine, he kept saying, wilder each time. How do you know that one? Where did you? They're all mine, Wang. Every technique you own. You've been fighting your whole life with the pages I threw away. I watched it land. This is the one place you were supposed to be my equal. Look where you're standing. And the peerless prodigy of the provincial capital, at the same rank as me at last, in the one arena built to make us equal, stood there drawing weapon after weapon out of a well that turned out to be mine, and wept. Then I turned him upside down and shook 4 treasures out of his pant leg. His halo dropped from 20,000 to 15. He rallied one more time because he always did. He ran to the 4 great inherited families in the relic, Sheng, Ding, Jing, Zhu, and told each of them I'd stolen a treasure they wanted, dangling their own greed as bait, and he kicked over a rock to discover a martial emperor manual he'd planted, one with a heaven-defying effect that worked only for its first reader, so he got the breakthrough and everyone he'd tricked got the dregs. Then he led hundreds of them at me at once, the whole envious weight of the relic aimed at one man. I told them to go ahead, all of them at the same time, don't be shy, and I put on a feather robe. It was a martial king-grade robe, junk from a pack, the sort of thing I'd normally never bother with, except that its one trick was that nothing below a peak martial king could scratch it, and inside the fairness relic there was nothing above a peak martial king. It was, for 1 hour, the single most broken item on the planet. Hundreds of the province's finest hit me at once with everything they had, and it all slid off like rain off a window. I put my hands in my pockets. Somebody's 30-year peak king finishing move broke against my sleeve and I didn't turn to look. Somebody else's ancestral saber snapped on my collar. I yawned, honestly at one point, right in the middle of the barrage, and the crowd arrived at the only conclusion available to them, which was that I simply ignored the relic's rules the way I ignored every other rule anyone had ever tried to hold me to. The attack curdled into panic and the panic into worship, and men who'd come to kill me got down and paid tribute instead. Every treasure they'd looted, their personal jewels, pressed on me to make me stop being unkillable at them. I kept Wang's 4 coveted treasures for the Dew Vault and let the rest pile up. The hour ran out, and the relic's own dragon aura swept everyone out the doors, me included, which was the one useful thing Wang's whole scheme taught me. Even I couldn't resist that pressure yet. There was a ceiling above me still, a room I couldn't stand up in, and it put a small cold spur in my side that I hadn't felt since the marble floor and the 2,000 yuan. I had a very long way still to climb. Outside, Wang broke through to 4th rank on his planted manual, a golden dragon crossing the sky for him, and I let him have it and walked away, because the system hadn't flagged him yet, and I had for once something of my own to think about. Wang went home to his stepmother, and for the first time I paid real attention to Fan Lihua. She received him in a wheelchair, in a room too quiet, young and lovely and cold as the far side of a window. Her legs had been ruined for years, and no medicine had mended them. Wang suspected what she was by now, a reincarnator, someone carrying a past life's power into this one. And he was right, though he didn't know how far it went. She struck a deal with him the way she struck all her deals, flatly. 2 mid-tier treasures, a warhammer, and a suit of heavy armor, in exchange for his signature on a contract to bring her a grade 7 herb within the week. The double lotus rejuvenation vine. The thing that could rebuild her legs and, with them, unlock whatever she'd really been in the life before. And underneath the transaction, the system let me see the thing she never said out loud, and it's the thing that undid me a little, if I'm honest. In her past life, Fan Lihua had a partner. The two of them had cultivated together all the way to 9th rank martial emperor, a divine couple, the kind of height the world tells stories about, and then they'd been cornered, and rather than die apart they'd used a pair of twin jade pendants to throw themselves forward into new lives, swearing to wake up and find each other again. She'd woken up. She'd been awake for years, in a broken body, running a cold, cruel household, and feeding a murderer's career, doing all of it while she waited to learn one single thing, whether he had woken up too. Whether she was waiting for a man or for a grave. I read all that in the space of a plot prompt, and I didn't have words for it yet, so I put it down and went to go win a contest. The new star ranking, first prize was almost embarrassing to say aloud. 10% of the province's economy, a mine, 2 ruins, 3 medicinal fields, 200 numbered stone chess pieces sat in the arena, and they sorted themselves by the true strength and treasure of whoever claimed them, first place to last, automatically and honestly. I walked in, picked up the piece that said 1, carried it to the entrance of the arena, sat down at a little table someone had set up, and ordered tea. I did not go in. I watched the whole thing on a live feed from 50 drones sipping, while chess piece number 1 sat locked in first place because there was, in that entire province of prodigies, nothing that could move it. Wang went in and did what Wang did, plundered a dozen contestants, murdered his way up the board, his halo climbing back to 30,000 on the strength of everything he stole, every point of it flowing to me as gift packs, because a rising protagonist is just a bigger deposit. He climbed and could not pass number 1. So I sent a little drone in to buzz him, herding him out toward the entrance where I was sitting, and he came out of the arena spitting. "You won't even come inside," he said. "You sit at the door drinking tea while the rest of us bleed for the ranking. You're doing great, honestly. Piece number 1 hasn't budged, but you're doing great." I topped up my cup. "Go on, show me." He threw 8 looted treasures at me at once, a barrage that would have leveled a small mountain. I knocked all 8 out of the air without getting up. 8 treasures, 8 gift packs, thank you very much. And then, finally, he drew the real weapons. His stepmother's warhammer and heavy armor, mid-tier treasures, the genuine article, everything Fan Lihua had given him. He came at me with all of it, and for the first time in the whole contest he looked like he might actually reach the table. I answered with the cloud-splitting spear, one thrust. The spear had a sacred cannon folded into its making, and his hammer did not. And that is the whole lesson. A treasure that carries its own truth beats a treasure that's only metal every time. His hammer shattered. His armor shattered. The spear went through and left the peerless prodigy near death in the dirt, and chess piece number 1 never so much as wobbled, and I won the new star ranking without finishing my tea. Far away, in a too-quiet room, Fan Lihua felt both her treasures break at once and did not flinch, because she had bigger griefs to sit with. Wang played dead in the arena until Du Jing pointed out that he was breathing, and I let him keep breathing, because a protagonist's luck is a renewable resource, and I wasn't done farming him. I opened 19 gift packs, mid-tier treasures, more clutter, and I sat with what the system had shown me about a woman in a wheelchair, and for the first time since I'd woken up on that marble floor, I wanted something the packs couldn't hand me. Wang had one job left that mattered to him, which was the grade 7 herb, the double lotus rejuvenation vine that would rebuild his stepmother's legs, and with them, whatever she'd really been. Marquis Wang's intelligence tracked it to a valley medicinal field, with the Wei family hunting it too, and the system showed me a bonus, that near it, Wang would also stumble onto a rare artificial treasure land, the kind of soil that turns ordinary herbs precious. So before anyone arrived, I had the Du family quietly buy the entire mountain range. Wang got to the field and bought the vine from an old herbalist, feeling clever, and started brokering the twin lotus half of it to the Wei family for a favor and 5 treasures. Then the Du family walked up with the deed. The herb was theirs, the land was theirs, the whole valley had been theirs for a week. They handed the Wei family the twin lotus for 8 treasures, took the vine, and Wang left with nothing, except he palmed a fragment of the rejuvenation vine on his way out, a sliver, tucked up his sleeve, and I let him think he'd gotten away with it, because that sliver was a leash, and I was about to follow it home. He fled straight into the treasure land, tidied it, planted his herbs to nurture, and my drones led me and the Du family right in behind him. His land too. He'd improved my soil for me, and while he stood there absorbing that, the Du elders mentioned, offhandedly, that they'd also gone ahead and seized the original Wang family medicinal field from the coordinates he'd handed over weeks ago. 2 fields lost in one afternoon. He ran. His halo dropped to 4,000 as he went, and I followed him personally, because the sliver of vine up his sleeve was going to lead me to the last thing standing between me and finishing him, his stepmother, his golden finger, the woman in the wheelchair. And then I fed the system its fragments, and it built my 7th servant, and the world I thought I understood turned over. Fan Lihua. It gave me Fan Lihua. Not as a stranger to command, as the identity that came with her, and the identity was this. I was her partner from the life before. The memories came back the way my first memories had, all at once and in the wrong order, except these weren't the doomed villains. These were mine. Ours. A whole lifetime of them. The 2 of us climbing together, year on year, all the way to 9th rank martial emperor, a divine couple the world had told stories about. The day we were cornered with no way out. The twin jade pendants in our hands. The promise, made fast and certain because there wasn't time for anything slow. Wake up and find me. I'll be waiting. She had been waiting. Years, in a broken body, in a cold house, feeding a murderer's career and asking every stranger with power the same silent question, and the whole time the answer had been across the province wearing a spoiled rich boy's face, opening gift packs, calling a god of wealth little son. I'd been hunting my own wife as an enemy asset. I'd read her grief in a system prompt and filed it under logistics. The power that came with her lifted me to 6th rank legendary martial emperor and made me a level 4 alchemist, and I couldn't have cared less about either, which if you've been listening you'll understand was not a small thing for me to feel. The system, oblivious, chose that moment to start upgrading my villain star from 6 points to 12, and to flag the next protagonist rising somewhere out in Dung City, a trash-to-hero named Xiaojun. I read the alert and set it aside. Some things come first. Wang brought his stolen sliver of vine home to Fan Lihua, and I followed him in through the door. She was in her chair when she saw me, and she knew. Not from anything I said. I hadn't said anything yet. She just knew. The way you know a voice in the dark is the one you've been listening for, and her cold, beautiful face came apart, and the first thing she did, the thing that cracked me clean down the middle, was pull a blanket over her ruined legs, because she'd waited a whole life and half of another to be found, and she didn't want the man she'd crossed death for to find her broken. I crossed the room. I crouched in front of the chair. I moved the blanket back. Leave it, I said. I've seen worse. I was there for worse. Her hands went still. You remember. All of it. The mountain. The 2 pendants. What you made me promise before we jumped. I put the rejuvenation vine in her lap, the real one, not the sliver. You told me to find you. I'm slow. Sorry it took 2 lifetimes. She didn't cry the pretty way. She cried like a person who'd been holding it since before I was even born into this body, furious and wrecked and relieved all at once. She hit me in the chest once, the side of her fist, not hard. Then she held on, and I let her, and Wang stood in the corner of it watching his whole religion burn down. I gave her the full rejuvenation vine, the real one, not Wang's stolen sliver, and I told the room, so there'd be no more filing her under logistics, so it would be true out loud, in a way it hadn't been true out loud in 2 lifetimes. This is my wife. Wang Bai stood in the corner of that reunion and felt the last load-bearing wall of himself give way. His whole legend, every treasure, every breakthrough, every scrap of the talent he'd built his religion on, it had all come from a woman, and the woman was mine and had never for 1 second been his. His golden finger was my wife. His destiny halo hit 0 while he watched us, and he had, at last, absolutely nothing left. I closed my hand, and Wang Bai died. A giant hand of chi, the same move I'd used on so many of his kind, and the peerless prodigy who'd murdered his way from the cradle went out of the world with nothing in his hands. But he got one message off first, thumbing it into his phone as he went, sending every secret he'd learned about me, the water droplet stone, the sacred cannon weapon, the medicinal fields, to a friend of his out in Dung City. Come bombard him, he wrote, avenge me. Then he was gone, and his phone buzzed with the reply, and I picked it up and answered it. The voice on the line was Xiao Jun's, and the system, chiming his stats into my eye, told me 2 things that made me stop and sit down. He was the next protagonist, and he was my senior brother, not Wang's, mine. In the world's backstory, before I was ever made the young lord of the Du family, my late master had a first disciple, a boy he took in when he had nothing, raised, and then set aside the day he found me, Xiao Jun. The trash to hero, the abandoned older brother who'd clawed his way up from being cast off and was coming home to Dung City to burn down everyone who'd ever scorned him, and then to flay the junior brother who'd stolen his inheritance and claim the old master's legacy for himself. I trolled him a little on Wang's phone, said something unkind, and hung up, because that's who I am. But I sat with it after. Deng Chang I'd felt nothing for, Wang I'd enjoyed. This one had a claim on the master I'd inherited, and a grievance that, from where he stood, wasn't wrong. I'd still take him apart. I just noted privately that the story had finally handed me an enemy whose anger I could understand. Wang's death rained 53 gift packs out of my ceiling, the biggest single haul I'd ever pulled, closer to 57 with the stragglers, and among them, at last, a fat stack of fate fragments. Another one, the system sighed, counting them down. Most hosts take years to bankrupt 100,000 Destiny protagonist. You do it in a season, and then look bored at the end. I am a little bored. Is there a bigger one? There's always a bigger one. That's the part I keep hoping you'll eventually find frightening. I never did. That was the whole problem with me, from the system's point of view, and I'd made my peace with it a long time ago. While I was still counting them, Gao Ting called, fully cured now, whole in body and mind, a direct heir of the Gao family and a 4th-rank emperor in her own right, about to become the head of a house that made the 4 great families look small. Her news was bad. The Dung City Gao family was Xiao Jun's very first target, and they knew it, and they were frantically recruiting 36 mid-tier emperors to power a formation treasure that could stand up to a high-tier one. She wanted my help. She also wanted, in the careful way she had, to know who the beautiful woman was that people said never left my side, and Fan Lihua, in the background, wanted to know the same thing about her, and I understood that my domestic situation had just acquired a second act. Then the star upgrade finished, and I synthesized the 12-pointed version for the first time, and it worked differently than the old one. The 6-pointed star had always handed me a servant and lifted me a little. The 12-pointed star was about lifting me. The servant it gave me was Wu Jing, the abbot of Dung City's Wudao Temple, an 8th-rank emperor, but the identity that came bolted to me was the prize, Bloodslaughter Asura. In the world's memory, I was the being who had walked alone into a living ruin, killed the high-world monsters inside it, and then killed every single human who'd entered with me, so that all of Dung City spoke the name in the same breath as a prayer and a warning. It made me a 9th-rank legendary martial emperor, the very top of the high tier, and it handed me the Killing Asura secret manual, a technique so drenched in slaughter that plants withered and animals fled when I ran it. I'd gone from struggling to stay above Wang to towering over Xiao Jun before he'd thrown a punch. I went to Dung City to meet my senior brother, and I traveled light, just Du Jing, a 5th-rank emperor, and Fan Lihua, who'd taken my pills back up to the peak of 6th rank. Dung City was a different weight class than Jiangnan province. Here a 4th-rank emperor was a mid-ranking nobody, and the air itself was thick with power. We arrived at the Gao family compound, which was packed shoulder to shoulder with the mid-tier emperors they'd hired to survive Xiao Jun. Gao Ting lit up when she saw me, and her father began doing the son-in-law arithmetic behind his eyes, and every powerful person in that courtyard took one look at the quiet woman at my side and dismissed her as the young master's maid. Fan Lihua let them. She'd been a 9th-rank martial emperor once. She could afford to be underestimated by a room full of people she could have ended with a look, and I could tell, watching her let them, that some part of the woman I remembered was still in there and was enjoying this. Xiao Jun came down on the Gao family like a verdict. He'd been engaged to a Gao cousin once, a girl named Gao Xiaoying, back when he was nothing, and she'd broken it off and made sure it hurt, and he'd spent every year since climbing toward this exact afternoon, the postponed wedding, the whole family gathered, all of them in one place, so he could end them all at once. He walked into the reception radiating high-tier pressure and killed 3 of their hired emperors between one breath and the next, a flick of the fingers each. "Do you remember me?" he asked the room, pleasant and terrible, stepping over what he'd made. "You should. You're the family that threw me out once, back when I was nothing worth keeping." The 36-man formation the Gao family had bankrupted themselves for barely managed to crack the cheap 100 yuan steel sword he was holding, and he had a bundle more just like it. Ordinary blades he went through like chopsticks. Gao Zhenkang groveled, the whole house braced to be slaughtered, and I went down the steps to meet my senior brother. I didn't fight him myself. I did something that annoyed him more. I took out an upgrade brush, a system treasure, a little thing you paint across an object to make it more than it was, and I forged, right there in front of everyone, in about the time it takes to describe it, a mid-tier heavy sword into a genuine high-tier treasure with a sacred cannon inside it, and I handed it to my wife. The courtyard stopped breathing. Nobody forges high-tier treasures on the spot. Nobody. And then Fan Lihua stepped forward with my new blade and went to work on Xiao Jun, and it turned out the maid everyone had dismissed could fight, because she'd been fighting at heights these people would never see. I forged her a second treasure while she was still swinging the first, and a third, until she was wielding 3 high-tier weapons at once, and my senior brother, a 7th-rank emperor, a real terror, was giving ground to a woman in borrowed strength and a man who kept casually inventing better weapons than his. He broke off and fled to go find himself a real sword. The Gao family lived. And to round out the afternoon, I refined a dragon marrow breakthrough pill on the spot and pushed Fan Lihua to 7th rank, and Dung City added a 3rd impossible thing to the list of what I was: martial artist, alchemist, and now artifact refiner, all at once, a triple threat that shouldn't exist in one person. Xiao Jun's halo dropped from 70,000 to 57, and the whole city started saying my name in the tone they usually reserved for weather and disasters. Xiao Jun's golden finger, the system finally told me, was a thing called Sword View. He carried 3,000 sword dows inside him, and it fed him kill quests to level up his killing sword, and it had just docked him for failing to slaughter the Gao family, which stung him worse than the retreat. So he went and pulled a sword out of a stone at an outfit called the Cloud Pavilion, and pulling it unlocked a demon-sealing stone box, which was the key to conquering a devilish chi living ruin nearby. The bad kind, zombies and high-world monsters, and a demonic fog that turned anyone it touched into one of the shambling things within half an hour. I followed him in. This was the useful thing about Xiao Jun. His sword view trials had taught him every monster's weak point, so he was a walking cheat sheet, and all I had to do was let him do the hard part. He killed a tree monster, the weakness was the eyes, and Du Jing scooped up the demon armor it dropped and passed it to me. He killed a giant hammer monster, the weakness was the throat, and in the confusion of it, I flicked a finger that everyone mistook for the monster's own hammer, and it sent Xiao Jun tumbling, and Du and Fan collected the demon sword and the hammer both while he was picking himself up. His sword in the stone shattered against Fan Lihua's new 7th rank strength, and he fled again, having conquered a ruin so that I could pocket the treasures inside it. The prize was a devilish chi origin stone sitting in a bed of demonic fog so thick anyone would have been a zombie before they crossed it. Anyone but Fan Lihua. She put on the demon armor, read the fog's patrol pattern with the calm of a woman who'd handled worse in a life these people couldn't imagine, walked in, and lifted it out. On her way, she planted a millstone in the flower bed, a heavy treasure with a thread of my own dragon chi humming in it to keep an eye on me while she worked. And under the noise of the ruin, quietly, with a thread of that dragon chi pressed into her palm so no one else could hear it, I told her the truth I hadn't said in front of the others, that I was already 9th rank, that she didn't have to worry about me, that she could stop standing between me and my own enemies. She didn't say anything back. She just held the thread a moment longer than she needed to. Xiao Jun chose that moment to ambush me, and the millstone knocked him flat before he got close, and he could not for the life of him understand how the young master kept surviving. The ruin was conquered when the stone came out. Xiao Jun's halo slid to 47,000, 12 more packs fell, and my wife and I walked out of a place that killed everyone else like a couple leaving a matinee. Xiao Jun's next target was the Wang family, fourth on the list of everyone who'd ever looked down on him, and they had something he wanted, a high-tier short sword called Moonlit Soliloquy that turned its wielder invisible. His golden finger handed him a kill quest for it, and he took the whole family to fill it. I'll pass over the details. It was a slaughter, and Xiao Jun came out of it drenched and pleased with himself, and the ones who died had done nothing worse than share a surname with a man's old grudge. The survivors came to me on their knees, because by now, when Xiao Jun came for you, I was the only door left to knock on. They offered me their entire fortune and the Flowing Cloud ruins, a fully conquered ruin that sped up cultivation and had made them a great house, and I took it and handed it to the Du family, and got there in the first place by riding a little folding fan, another piece of junk that happened to move faster than anything else in the province. The abbot of the Wudao Temple, an 8th rank named Wu Jing, declined to help the Wang family, which I noted because I knew something about the abbot that he didn't know about me yet. Then Xiao Jun attacked me with Moonlit Soliloquy, invisible, a killing stroke out of empty air, and I caught it between 2 fingers without looking and put it in my pocket. He'd also, at some point, started calling himself the Blood Slaughter Asura, my title, the name that made all of Dung City go quiet. He'd draped it over his own shoulders like he'd earned it, and I have to tell you, of all the petty grievances I collected against Xiao Jun, that one stung the most, watching a man cosplay as me while I stood there being the actual article. Fan Lihua asked mildly if she could have the short sword. She'd always preferred a short blade, and I said of course, and forged her the Wang family's flowing water rapier into a high-tier treasure besides, so she had a matched set. I put a mountain finger through the air at Xiao Jun then, enough to end him. And that was when he finally showed me the trick that was going to be a genuine problem. The sword view escape. He shrank. Not metaphorically. He collapsed himself down to a single massless point, intangible, untouchable, and slid out of the path of a blow that should have erased him, and reappeared 100 meters off, unharmed. His golden finger even rewarded him for surviving me with a dragon fang short sword. I filed that away with a small frown. A man you can't hit is a man you have to outthink, and I don't like problems I can't solve by being stronger, because being stronger had been so reliably fun. He ran to the Wudao Temple to recruit the abbot as a backer, and on the way he met a girl, Wu Xiaofeng, sweet, low-ranked, entirely unintimidating, and blessed with what the system called a lucky face, a fortune that brought prosperity to whoever she married, a walking good luck charm, and a genuine female lead opportunity for whichever protagonist reached her first. Xiao Jun flirted, coached her clumsy swordplay, felt like a mentor, and the abbot, Wu Jing, watching from the shadows, decided Xiao Jun was worth inviting in. So I walked into the Wudao Temple where my own 12-star servant kept his house, and I coached Wu Xiaofeng's swordplay too, except I taught her the real, deep truth of the Sword Sky Imperial Diagram, a manual I happen to know inside and out. It was, as it happened, the exact manual the abbot Wu Jing had been studying for 3 years without cracking. Xiao Jun laughed and called my teaching made-up nonsense, and then Wu Jing, listening from the next room to a stranger casually speak the profound truth he'd chased for 3 years, broke through on the spot to 9th rank, a phenomenon that lit up the sky over Dung City. He came out of that room and went straight to his knees in front of me. Master. Because in the world's memory, I was the author of the manual and his own teacher, and when Xiao Jun opened his mouth to sneer at the manual one more time, Wu Jing backhanded him clear across the temple, nearly killing him for it. You called it made up. Wu Jing stood over my senior brother, shaking. You called the master's own manual a fraud. Xiao Jun spat red. Master, he's the Chung boy, he's beneath. Then I let my aura open, just a crack of it, and Wu Jing, a fresh 9th rank cultivator, put his forehead to the temple floor, and the whole watching city did the arithmetic in one collective breath. The Blood Slaughter Asura in the crimson robe wasn't a 7th rank pretender playing dress-up. He was a 9th rank legendary martial emperor who'd been standing quietly at the back of the room the whole time, letting a lesser man cosplay his title. Xiao Jun, who had spent this entire arc lording a couple of tears over the arrogant Qing boy, felt the floor of his understanding fall out, and coughed blood, and understood at last which of us the name belonged to. Wu Xiaofeng's lucky face opportunity evaporated in the reshuffle. worth 5,000 destiny, and worth remembering because a good luck charm is exactly the sort of thing a man in my line of work should keep close. Xiaojun's halo dropped to 39,000, and my senior brother for the first time looked afraid. Wu Jing went to finish Xiaojun for the insult, and Xiaojun shrank to a point and slid away again, and I confirmed what I'd suspected. The sword view escape was, for now, unbeatable. Even a 9th rank strike passed through the space where he'd been. It was maddening in a very specific way. I could beat him 100 times and never once keep him beaten. His halo fell to 32,000 from the humiliation anyway, and I collected another fragment, 5 now toward the next 12-star, and noted an enlightenment stone cushion in the temple that bumped cultivation 20% for anyone who sat on it, which I filed under nice to have. Meanwhile, the Wu family came to my villa and knelt. They wanted their estranged son, Wu Jing, back, the one who'd run off 20 years ago after a feud with an elder who'd since died, and I agreed to mediate because a 9th rank abbot's grateful family is a good thing to have, and because Wu Xiaofeng came with them. The He family, the Winter Marshals, and the Du family had all relocated to Dung City by now. My whole traveling circus reassembled in the bigger world. Xiaojun, running low on options, got a quest from his golden finger to unite all of Dung City's clans against me. Reward, 8th rank strength, so he sent out invitations to a grand alliance banquet. Nobody came, not one clan. They'd all watched a 9th rank emperor kowtow to me and drawn the obvious conclusion, and Xiaojun sat alone at a banquet for 200 and failed the quest to an empty room. But an empty room has its uses, because while he stewed in it, he overheard 2 visitors from Ling City, Ding Hu and Pan Yi, 9th rank emperors both, talking about their real errand. They were hunting 2 reincarnators, a man and a woman who mastered every new rank the instant they touched it, and Xiaojun put it together fast. That was Fan Lihua, and that was me. He offered to sell them our location in exchange for an 8th rank herb and a hand killing me, and his golden finger dangled 9th rank strength as the reward, and the 2 agreed. They planned to betray him after, of course. Everyone always planned to betray Xiaojun after. It's a lonely thing to be, a protagonist nobody even keeps their promises to. Fed a fragment up to the peak of 7th rank, Xiaojun led the 2 assassins to my villa, cutting down a few Wu family messengers on the way with his dragon fang sword. And then the assassins arrived, extended their senses toward the young master they'd come to murder, and felt what I actually was, 9th rank, middle stage running into late, while they were only early, and their whole confidence evaporated. They turned to run. I didn't let them. I rode the Thunder Gourd down and crushed both 9th rank assassins like a man stepping on ants, because my rank had been forged in at a perfect grade, and theirs had been earned the slow, honest way, and there's no contest between the 2. And there was a private reason I didn't feel bad about it, which the system confirmed as they died. They were agents of the organization that had cornered and killed Fan Lihua and me in our last life. Only a decoy pair, not the hand that actually did it. That one was still out there, but close enough to the old wound that I took a certain quiet satisfaction in it that had nothing to do with gift packs. I burned Xiaojun with a flame treasure to round out the day, and he shrank to a point and escaped again. 13 more packs, halo down to 22,000. I kept Wu Xiaofeng around after that, officially as a good luck charm for opening packs. Her lucky face genuinely seemed to improve my pulls, or at least I told myself so, and it gave the girl a safe place to be. Fan Lihua watched me install a cheerful young woman in our household as a fortune charm, and accepted the new category with a dryness that told me she remembered exactly what I was like, across 2 lifetimes now, and had decided to be amused rather than concerned. Xiaojun spent 3 days frozen inside his own sword view, somewhere I couldn't reach, communing with his 3,000 swords. When he came out, he'd made a decision that would change the whole shape of the story. He was done with Dung City. He was going to run and find something bigger. Fleeing Dung City, Xiaojun fell into the Hidden Lotus ruins, killed the 5 mid-tier guards who'd sleepily protected it for years, and got a gift from a senior skeleton down in its depths, a one-time trial card that made him 9th rank for a single hour, enough to cross the river of crisis to the Lotus treasure at its heart, a thing that stabilized your cultivation and multiplied your speed tenfold. The treasure announced itself the way they all do, and all of Dung City poured in, and I flew over on the gourd. The River of Crisis was a floor of lotus leaves over a corroding dragon chi, and only the true leaves held. A wrong step dissolved you. Higher rank bought more wrong guesses before you died, which is why Xiaojun, halfway across, sat down on a leaf to hoard his precious hour and let lesser men scout the path with their lives. I didn't need the path scouted. The system had handed me the answer key, so I walked straight across the Death River without slowing down, stepping on the exact right leaves in the exact right order like a man crossing his own living room, and I took the lotus treasure out from in front of Xiaojun's face while he was still doing arithmetic on his trial card. He came at me then with everything. Trial card 9th rank strength and a genuine battle epiphany that fused his 2 sword Deos into something new, the best he'd ever been. My heavy sword shattered his sword boat, snapped his dragon fang blade, and nearly ended him, and he shrank to a point and escaped one more time, and I let the frustration go, because there's no use being angry at weather. I offered the lotus treasure to Manhua. She pushed it back at me, told me I should take it, that the Ling City organization would never stop hunting the two of us over a treasure from our last life, that I needed to stop giving everything away and get stronger for once. It was, I realized, the first time in either life anyone had worried about me out loud. I told her I didn't cultivate treasures like that anymore, that the packs would keep me ahead, and I gave it to her anyway. Xiaojun's halo crashed to 9,000, 13 packs fell, and his trial card ran out an hour later, dropping him back to 7th rank with every treasure he'd grabbed lost, alone in a plundered ruin, self-harming in the dark. Wu Jing had broken through to the peak of 9th rank by then, and when he learned Xiaojun had butchered a swath of the Wu family and kept spitting on his master's name, he went hunting. And Wu Jing did the thing I hadn't managed. He cracked the sword view escape. Xiaojun shrank to his massless point and screamed the incantation, "Sword view, save me," and Wu Jing drove a heart-piercing awl through the exact spot faster than the words could finish, and my senior brother, for the first time, was genuinely about to die. And that's when the ceiling I'd been feeling for finally showed itself. A sword came down out of nowhere and turned Wu Jing's kill aside, a 5-meter blade held by a man named Xiao Jie, a 10th order martial sovereign, the very top of the martial emperor world, a full step above my 9th rank. He called Xiaojun junior brother, because Cao Ji was the second owner of the sword view, and the first owner, the one who'd made all 3,000 swords, was their shared master, and their master was a martial god, a tier above martial emperor entirely, a word I'd only heard in the way you hear about the bottom of the ocean. Wu Jing, a 9th rank peak, took one look at the 10-meter presence of that sovereign and fled, which was the correct decision. Cao Jai gathered up his broken junior brother, promised him special training, mentioned some errand he had here in Dung City, and said that afterward he'd take Xiaojun home to Ling City to meet the master. I stood on my gourd and watched them go, and for the first time since the marble floor, I felt that cold spur again, sharp and useful. There was a bigger world above me. There was a martial god at the top of the stairs, and somewhere between me and him was a 10th order sovereign who just walked into my city looking for something and hadn't so much as glanced at me on his way past, because as far as Cao Ji knew, I was beneath his notice. I intended to correct that, but first, I wanted to know what he'd come to Dung City to take. Finding out what Cao Ji had come for was easy, because a 10th order sovereign doesn't bother being subtle in a place he considers a backwater. He fed Xiaojun a chicken stewed with 3 grade 8 herbs, a snack, to him, worth a fortune to anyone else, and shot my senior brother up to the late stage of 8th rank, and then he went looking for the real prize, the blood-soul demonic blade. I laughed when the system told me. Because the blade was mine. Years ago, in the world's backstory, the blood-slaughter Asura, me, had left a 1-meter shard of devilish chi in a Dung City ruin to ripen for 3 years into a martial god-grade weapon, and the 3 years were, as of this week, up. Cao Ji had crossed from resource-rich Ling City to this cultivation desert to steal a sword I'd planted before I was born into this body. The world is very funny if you're standing in the right place, so I built myself a bigger place to stand. I fed the system a fresh set of fragments, and it gave me Tang Bai, the owner of the Yunjing Xuan, a famous medicinal cuisine restaurant in Ling City that was secretly the front for the Jingyun Pavilion, the best intelligence network in the region, and Tang Bai was a 10th order martial sovereign, and the identity that came with him made me its founder and lifted me to level 10 perfection, the strongest thing under a martial god. Tang Bai's network came with a housewarming gift of information too. The organization hunting Fan Lihua and me was called the Wu Fang Secret Guard, and the treasure they wanted was the Dragon Phoenix Twin Heart Jade, the very pendant we'd use to reincarnate, which could also transfer life between the two of us, a thread still tying our fates together across the gap of death. And the system flagged the protagonist after Xiaojun, already stirring out in Ling City. Luo Ding, a martial god. The first owner and creator of the Sword View, 90,000 destiny, a level 6 artifact refiner, coming eventually to reclaim his masterwork. I looked at that number, martial god, and felt the ceiling get a little higher and a little closer, and got to work. The blade was born in a pillar of crimson light that the whole province could see, and I put on the crimson robe and the Shura mask that came with my Asura identity and told Wu Jing the truth of who his master was, and he wept, because of course he did. Out at the ruin, Cao Jie scattered the treasure-hunting crowd with a 5-meter sword and reached for the blade, and the blade refused him. It refused everyone. A martial god weapon only answers its master. I arrived with Wu Jing, and Dung City saw the crimson robe and the mask, and understood that their legend had come home, and even Xiaojun, in his ruined pride, felt safe enough to point Cao Ji at me, still thinking I was only 9th rank, still not understanding what he was looking at. Cao Ji swung his giant sword at me, and I sealed it. That was the whole answer to a 10th order sovereign in the end. A space sealing manual, the second half of the very text Wu Jing had worshipped for years, froze that 5-meter blade in the air mid-swing. It just stopped, a killing stroke from the top of the martial emperor world, hanging over my head like a chandelier, going nowhere. That's not possible, Cao Ji said, straining against it, the first crack in a sovereign's calm. Nothing below a martial god can hold my... I know. I wrote the manual you'd need to break it, both halves. I turned my back on the frozen sword and finished the swordplay lesson I'd been giving Wu Jing when Cao Ji interrupted us, unhurried, a sovereign's death suspended and forgotten behind me. Wu Jing was so rattled he kept glancing at the hanging blade. I told him to stop looking at it, it wasn't going anywhere, and to watch my wrist instead. Then I called the blood-soul demonic blade, and it flew across the ruin to my hand, the way the gourd had, the way they all did, because it knew its master, and I fed it my devilish chi treasures, the demon sword, the demon armor, the origin stone, and it drank them, and grew. And I let my real weight show at last, level 10 perfection, 10th order myself, so that Cao Ji understood in his last minutes that he'd walked into a backwater to rob a man who stood exactly as high as he did and cut deeper. The sword view escape, I finally understood, worked, because it held a sliver of martial god power, a thing above any emperor's reach, which was why nothing an emperor did could ever touch that shrinking point. Good to know, because I was about to need to beat it without hitting it. Cao Ji, sealed and helpless, begged Xiao Jun for the sword view. Junior brother, a 10th order sovereign's voice, cracking on the word. The sword view, lend it to me and I'll carry us both out of here. There's one seat in that escape, Xiao Jun said. It's mine. Die well, fellow Taoist. So the man who'd crossed the whole world to save him learned, at the last second, the thing all of Dung City already knew for free. Xiao Jun would watch anyone alive burn before he'd share the exit. He kept the escape for himself and opened his mouth to shrink to his little point and slide away one final time, and I gagged him. A homing demonic slime, another quiet piece of junk, poured into his mouth and sealed it, seeped down into the skin so it couldn't be cut away, and my senior brother could not speak the incantation. That was the whole trick. 3,000 swords, a martial god's masterpiece, an escape no emperor could touch, and it needed him to say 2 words out loud, and I'd simply filled his mouth. The blade came down and cleaved Cao Ji's indestructible sword, and Cao Ji with it, and devoured him, and grew again, and then it turned to Xiao Jun. He worked his jaw against the slime, eyes going wild, trying to shape the 2 words that had slid him out of every death I'd ever sent at him, and nothing came out but glue. He'd survived 100 killing blows on the strength of 2 syllables, and now he had a sealed mouth and a blade the size of a house swinging his way, and all of Dung City stood in the crimson light cheering the return of their blood-slaughter Asura. There was nothing left for my senior brother to do but die. He died. His destiny halo hit 0, and 72 gift packs came down out of the sky, the biggest rain yet, and the sword view itself dropped out of the air and landed at my feet, a little palm-sized figurine, a masterwork reduced to a paperweight, waiting for its creator to come and find out I'd broken it. I picked it up. Somewhere out in Ling City, a martial god felt his life's work go quiet and started sharpening his revenge, and I stood there holding it and thought, with the old useful cold spur back in my side. Good. Come get it. Out in Ling City, a martial god felt 2 students die. Luo Ding had built the sword view, 3,000 sword daos, a whole cosmos of blades folded into one figurine, his life's masterwork, and he'd left a thread of his own will inside it, a back door, so he could always feel it and always find it. Through that thread he felt Cao Ji cleaved and Xiao Jun silenced, and through it he saw my face, the man in the crimson mask who'd reduced his masterpiece to a paperweight. He didn't rage the way Deng Qiang would have. He was a martial god. He had the patience of altitude. He simply decided with total calm that he would reclaim the sword view and unmake the man holding it, and he began, unhurried, to come. And he wasn't the only weather moving toward me. The Wufang secret guard finally noticed that 2 of its 9th rank agents had gone silent in Dung City, and its masters gave a single order: every squad to Dung City, kill the reincarnated man and woman, and free the dragon phoenix twin heart jade from whatever body it was hiding in. 2 martial god-scale problems converging on my city at once, which meant it was time to open 72 gift packs. They gave me 11 fate fragments, 14 now, more than enough, and a pile of martial god-grade clutter I'd be handing out like napkins soon. And I fed the system a full 12 fragments and synthesized my second 12-pointed star, and it built me Wei Tian, a martial god of the 1st rank, late stage, head of an exiled family, and the identity that bolted to me this time was a bloody one. In the world's memory, I was the war refiner they called killing 10,000 men, the artificer who'd built the killing machines that emptied battlefields. It lifted me to martial god, 3rd rank, middle stage, and made me a level 6 artifact refiner, even with, or a hair above, Luo Ding himself. The breakthrough shockwave flattened my own villa, which Steward Zhang, bless him, had rebuilt so many times by now that he simply sent for the contractors before the dust settled. Luo Ding tested me first from a distance, the careful way a martial god does. He poured his will down the back door into a puppet, a 10th order body he controlled like a glove, and sent it at me to measure my strength. I blew it away in one breath. And then, because he'd been kind enough to open the connection, I took the Swordview figurine in my hand and did to it what a level 6 refiner can do to another refiner's work. I crushed it, unmade it. And everything folded inside spilled out into my hands. 3,000 sword dows, a treasury of blades, cultivation crystals, and best of all its core, the ruin heart Luo Ding had built the whole thing around, which I already knew I'd reforge into something of my own. His life's masterpiece became my raw materials. His halo dropped from 90,000 to 78, 12 packs fell, and somewhere far off, a martial god felt his creation die a second time in his own hand's reach, and did not so much as change expression, which told me he was going to be the most dangerous one yet. I told my household I was going to Ling City to end it. Gao Zhengkang, Gao Ting's father, a fair weather man to his bones, heard the words martial god and Wu Fang's secret guard, and recoiled, and locked his daughter in her rooms so she couldn't follow me into a fire. My own people did the opposite. Fan Lihua, the He family, Wu Jing, Ho Wen, every one of them volunteered to die at my side without my asking, and it landed on me the way these things had started landing on me lately, heavier than gift packs, so I did what I could with what I had. I poured the lotus treasure and the crystals and a legendary martial god Dan into Fan Lihua and Wu Jing and lifted them both into the martial god realm, and then I told the rest of them plainly to stop volunteering to die for me, because I was already a martial god myself and had been for a while. It's a strange thing, watching people who've decided to die for you find out they don't have to. Some of them almost looked disappointed. We went to Ling City. Tang Bai's network was waiting with the lay of it. The Wu Fang secret guard's true master was Han Zhe, a martial god, the last survivor of a Han family I'd apparently had some history with, and under him ran 3 martial god captains. I didn't wait to be found. I walked into the Wu Fang headquarters and started taking it apart floor by floor to reclaim what was mine. The Dragon Phoenix Twin Heart Jade, the pendant that had carried Fan Lihua and me across death and still tied our 2 lives together. Wu Jing reaped the guards like a farmer at harvest, quick and quiet, and I'll leave it at that. We climbed the tower toward the top floor, where the last guardian waited over the jade, and I could feel it up there through the old thread that still ran between the pendant and my wife, a warmth pulling me up the stairs, the other half of a thing I'd carried out of one life and into another. The top floor held 3 martial god captains, led by one called Chung Kai, and they thought they'd cornered me. It's a recurring theme, people thinking they've cornered me right up until they haven't. I condensed pure dragon origin power into a short sword at my fingertips, a thing only the strongest martial gods can do, and used it once, and all 3 of them were gone, bodies unmade, before the first could finish his threat. Then I lifted the Dragon Phoenix Twin Heart Jade off its stand, and the old thread between it and Fan Lihua lit up warm and whole, the lifelink between us live again after 2 lifetimes. I gave her a martial god golden bell to guard her life on top of it, because I'd lost her once and had opinions about that now. Wu Jing cleaned out the rest of the building, and the Wu Fang Secret Guard, an organization that had hunted my wife across death itself, stopped existing on a Tuesday. Its true master, Han Zi, felt his order die from a distance and did what they all did, vowed revenge, swore to reclaim the jade, and Luo Ding's people brought him the news that the man who destroyed the Swordview was here in Ling City, styling himself Blood Slaughter Asura, level 10 perfection. Luo Ding took it as a gift. He walked into my trap, the martial god thought, pleased, and settled in to rearm himself before the hunt. At the Wanyue Lao, a grand auction of artifact refining materials, the exact place a level 6 refiner goes to prepare, which was convenient because I needed materials too to reforge his ruin core, so we shopped at the same sale. I ruined his shopping the way I ruined everyone's. He tried to steer an alchemist named Yang Yang away from a fire-patterned wood by declaring it a fake. A real martial god's word carries weight, so Tang Bai's front bought the fake cheap and cracked it open in front of the room to reveal a top-grade fire-patterned ancient sandalwood inside. Luo Ding lost the treasure and the alchemist's future goodwill in one stroke. Then he quietly won the thing he'd actually come for, a measure of ultra-rare hidden spirit sand that raises a refiner's success rate, and I outbid him for it with Tang Bai's bottomless purse and took it away. He came to me afterward, a martial god, and laid his finest gear out on the table to trade for the sand, mahjong tile treasures refined over a lifetime, the pride of a level 6 artificer. Name your price, he said. Anything on this table. These are the best pieces in the province. I looked them over the way you look over a menu you have no intention of ordering from. This is garbage. I beg your pardon. Garbage. That one's cracked at the core. That one's 2 generations out of date. And that one you overpaid for at an auction I was also sitting in. I pushed the pile back across the table with one finger. Get lost. You're standing in my light. You have to understand what it does to a proud man to have a masked stranger appraise his life's finest possessions as junk and wave him off like a waiter who's brought the wrong dish. He held it together. Barely. With my materials, I reforged the Swordview's core into a shuttle boat, a flying vessel 10 times faster than a 4th rank martial god could run. Its defenses uncrackable by anything below 3rd rank, fixing every flaw the old Swordview ever had. Luoding staked out the auction exit to ambush me, and when he saw my face he recognized the man who'd unmade his masterpiece, but he still thought I was a level 10 figurehead, a hired mask that Tang Bai had propped up. So when he confronted me expecting a fraud, I let a martial god's aura roll off me and condensed the dragon origin sword again, and the truth pulled the ground out from under him. His Mahjong tile shields shattered. A martial god who fought with Mahjong, I never got tired of that. And he fled through a Mahjong core escape, and I let him run because he was still the best treasure detector I owned. His halo slid to 68,000, 10 more packs, 4 fragments now. He teamed up with Han Zhe next, the last Han survivor, over a shared hatred of me and a shared prize. Luoding had located the Han family's old treasure trove, which needed Han Zhe's blood to open, and the two of them planned to break through to 2nd rank martial god on its contents, and then come kill me together. So I read the plot prompt, got there first, and blasted the blood-locked vault door off its hinges with my shuttle boat, revealing to a stunned Fan Lihua and Wu Jing that I'd quietly become a 3rd rank martial god, and emptied the place. I fed a devilish chi weapon from the horde to the blood-souled demonic blade, pocketed the grade 7 materials, and then, because the timing was too good to waste, I set out a picnic on the grass by the open vault and waited. They arrived to an empty treasury and a man eating lunch. Han Zi looked at the bare vault, then at me, then at the picnic. Where is it? That's a blood-locked door. Only Han blood opens it. Only mine. Your blood, my shuttle boat. The boat won. I waved at the grass. There's plenty here. Sit. You've come a long way to find an empty room. You should at least eat. He did not sit. Hanzei lost his composure entirely, came at me screaming, the Han family's lion withering technique roaring off him, and the blade rose up and cleaved him and swallowed him whole, and grew again, fat on martial gods now. Luo Ding, watching his ally devoured, did the smart thing and ran, and as he ran, he threw down a scarecrow life-substitute treasure to cover his escape, and the blade, blood-hungry, chased the treasure instead of the man, because it turned out my great martial god weapon had the impulse control of a dog that sees a squirrel. Noted, I thought, watching Luo Ding vanish while my legendary blade happily mauled a scarecrow. My most fearsome weapon would drop anything to eat a shinier thing. That was going to matter someday. His halo hit 57,000, 11 more packs, and I finished my lunch. Luo Ding's luck was still working, the way a protagonist's luck does right up until it doesn't. He picked up a junk parchment map at a market that turned out to pair with 2 chess key treasures, one his, one belonging to a martial god named Fang Shan, and together, the 3 keys pointed to the treasure pavilion, a hidden ruin stuffed with a hoard. He planned to borrow Fang Shan's key, open the place, and kill him for the whole thing. The 3rd key sat in a rural courtyard at the home of a little girl he'd taken as a student. Here is the part of the story I don't tell with jokes. The girl was Fang Xiaomeng. Luo Ding had picked her up the way a certain kind of man collects tools, a frightened village child with a knack for refining, useful, disposable. And on his way to the ruin, he left her a set of refining equipment he called a test, and the equipment was rigged to overload because he was done with her, and a dead student leaves no loose ends, and he simply did not think of her as a person who could be killed, only as a thing that could be discarded. He walked away and left it ticking in a house with her whole family inside. I got there because the system led me to the 3rd key, and I arrived to a home that was coming apart, and I want to be plain about what I did and didn't see, because there are lines I keep on the winning side of, even when the winning side is the only place I ever stand. I didn't let it happen. I stopped it. And where the damage had already been done, I undid it. I still carried Deng Chang's water droplet stone, saturated to hundreds of lives by a 1,000-year tree, and I spent some of them without a second thought, and I brought Fang Xiaomeng's family back whole, her mother and her father breathing again in their own kitchen, the way you'd ride a chair someone had kicked over. I told the girl what her teacher had done and why, so she'd never have to wonder, and then I took her on myself as my own artifact refining disciple, a real one, and had Tang Bai give her whole family a home and honest work in Ling City. It cost me nothing I couldn't spare. It's the closest I came, in either life, to feeling like the hero of one of these instead of the thing that eats them, and I'm not going to pretend I didn't notice the difference. Then I went and took everything Luo Ding had. I beat him to the courtyard and took the 3rd key, and when he and Fang Shan arrived to find the place razed, the 2 martial gods had to go into the treasure pavilion with only 2 keys between them, which opened the outer vault and nothing else, and neither of them trusted the other enough to do better. Inside, Luo Ding grabbed a top-grade inkstone shield, a genuine treasure, and I walked in behind him because he was still the best living map to every horde in the region. Follow the greedy man, find the gold. He tried to force a 50-50 split on me, leaning on his inkstone defense and the round key that could seal everyone inside. So I called the blade, and the blade ate the defensive runes right off his inkstone and shattered it, and I took both keys and opened the whole treasure pavilion. A hoard worth 100 gift packs poured into my hands. Luo Ding, desperate, braved the devilish Qi danger zone at the ruin's heart, which was really just where the best of the hoard was kept, and came out with a golden melon hammer that drank demonic Qi and swung it at me on his way past, and I sealed it in the air, and the blade leaned over and devoured the hammer out of his hands, and he fled through a jade-escape treasure with nothing left. I let Fang Shan go too. He'd figured out by then that Luo Ding had lied to him about me being some merciless butcher, and he wanted no further part of a martial god who ate treasures and dismissed martial gods as garbage, and I let him carry that impression home. Luo Ding's halo crashed from 57,000 to 28 packs at once, 39 total, 4 more fragments. He had, at this point, tried to arm himself against me at least a dozen ways, and every single time he'd simply gone shopping for me and delivered the goods to my door. I went to see my newest servant properly. Wei Tian's family had been exiled from Ling City by the Duan family, the city's #1 house, led by Duan Fang, a level 6 artifact refiner, and the Taishi ancestral manor, the one they'd lost, happened to sit on a treasure land that doubled cultivation speed, a ruin that had been conquered generations back by a legend called the Warblade Martial Emperor. I armed the whole exiled Taishi family out of my clutter and sent them to take their home back. Luo Ding, still hunting a way to hurt me, allied with Duan Fang, my enemy's enemy, and gifted him a grade 7 material, and the two refiners built a small army of exoskeleton war machines to crush the Taishi senior backing the reclamation, the senior being me. It became a citywide spectacle. The Taishi and the Duan families going to war in the streets of Ling City with a martial god's war machines stomping through the middle of it, and everyone came out to watch. So I gave them a show. I called the Blood Soul Demonic Blade, and I stepped onto it, and I flew. You need to understand what that meant in Ling City. Flying on a blade, riding a saber through the air by will alone, was the signature of exactly one legend, the Warblade Martial Emperor, the being who'd conquered the Taishi treasure land, the only man below the Martial Saint realm who could do it, the one who'd flattened the entire city in a single day generations ago. And here he was, back, crimson-masked, standing on a martial god blade 100 feet up, and the whole war stopped to look. Someone on the Duan wall found his voice first. He's standing on the blade, he's flying on the blade, that's the Warblade. And couldn't get the rest out, because getting the rest out meant saying aloud that the legend who'd flattened all of Ling City in a single day was back and hanging in the sky over their heads. I rained Saber Key down like a barrage of missiles and turned the exoskeletons into scrap, and the Duan family threw down their weapons and surrendered on the spot, because you do not fight the Warblade Martial Emperor, you kneel and you hope he's in a good mood. Luo Ding fled the battle mid-swing. On his way out, he looted the Duan family's own materials warehouse. Reflexive, that man, he'd steal from a sinking ship, and Duan Fang, who had just surrendered to me, was so appalled at being robbed by his own ally that he begged for the honor of hunting Luo Ding down. Luo Ding escaped anyway, but he escaped in disgrace, having betrayed the last person willing to work with him. The Taishi family got their manor back, and every asset Ling City had stripped from them, and Luo Ding's halo fell to 19,000, 10 more packs. He had a couple of tricks left, and I let him run them, because a cornered martial god is at his most generous. He recruited 10 martial god powerhouses, mostly Taishi debtors dodging repayment, and led them into a cave maze ruin to harvest 100 tiny artifact cores and a flowing light spirit liquid, a spatial rift escape treasure, planning to mass-produce weapons and flyers, and finally outarm me. I let him gather every bit of it. On the way home, he even lucked into a high-grade Martial Emperor space sealing manual and mastered it in 3 hours, good enough to trap a third-rank martial god. He was, right up to the end, genuinely brilliant, and it genuinely never mattered. Then I set out the picnic one more time. The Taishi family engaged his 10 martial gods, and I sealed Luo Ding himself inside a 2-meter cube of frozen space, my seal dwarfing the one he'd been so proud of, and fed a dragon origin handprint at him through a pinhole. Every escaped treasure he owned died against that seal, one after another, nullified, useless. Everyone except the flowing light spirit liquid, the spatial rift, which tore a hole through space itself and pulled him out through it a heartbeat before the handprint landed. He escaped. But I stripped the 100 cores and the space manual off him as he went, and for the first time his destiny halo went negative. -4,000, a number I hadn't known the system could show, because he'd finally lost more than he had, and that was where the world changed shape, because a martial god at negative destiny is a drowning man, and something reached down to him. A will clone flickered into being beside the fleeing Luo Ding. Not the Wu Fang secret guard, not anyone I'd fought yet, something new, and it offered him a lifeline. It belonged to a man named Bai Fang, a fifth-rank martial god with a golden finger unlike anything I'd seen. Not a sword view, not a synthesis, but a sacrifice. Bai Fang could reach across to a parallel world and drag a ruin down onto his own territory, feeding whole cities into the dark for power. He handed Luo Ding a locator to plant in the heart of Ling City and a teleport jade to run with. And just like that, my last enemy from the old world became the first pawn of a new one. The system chimed the next protagonist into my eye, and the number made me sit up. Bai Fang, 90,000 destiny, and it offered me a way to meet him on his level, so I synthesized my third 12-pointed star, and this one didn't just make me stronger, it moved me into a bigger world entirely. The servant was the star ancient clan of a place called Tiandu City, and the identity was their young master Duan, and it lifted me to martial god, 8th rank, and rewrote the map. New city, new ladder, one that climbed past martial god into ranks I hadn't known existed. Same me, same system, same wife at my side, and same doghouse gourd at the gate. But the small world was behind us now. First though, I had a martial god to bury. I beat Luo Ding to the center of Ling City, and I did to him what I'd been doing to protagonists since the marble floor. I strung him along, let him hand over the 100 cores and his finest treasures and the locator and the teleport jade, thinking he was buying his way clear, and then I sealed him where he stood, and this time there was no spatial rift liquid left to save him. The creator of the sword view, the martial god who'd shopped for me a dozen times, went out of the world, and 80 gift packs rained down out of the sky. His whole arc, from the day he felt his students die to the day he handed me his last escape, had been one long delivery service, and I tipped him with a grave. I stood in the center of Ling City, with 80 packs falling around me, and a teleport jade in my hand that led to a man who ate cities, and I thought about how far the marble floor was behind me, and how much farther the stairs still went up. I used the teleport jade and stepped out of the air in front of Bai Fang himself, the man who ate cities. He was a 5th-rank martial god, and he did what they all do when they meet me, attacked first, and I, at 8th rank, pinned him flat with a fraction of a thought. He teleported away on a jade of his own before I could take him apart, and I let him, because I wanted that golden finger of his, the reach into parallel worlds, and you don't rush a man who can pull dungeons out of the sky. His halo dropped from 100,000 to 87 on that one exchange, 13 packs. Then I opened 93 of them at once, and among the fragments I pulled a legendary treasure, the Jade Pool 7 Fairies diagram. It was a pocket world, a place where time and spirit ran rich, and it could hold up to 7 women and accelerate their cultivation to a frankly unfair degree. I could enter it myself, but it gave me nothing. Its gift was for the people I put inside it. I put Fan Lihua in first. My wife had spent one whole life climbing at my side and half of another waiting in a wheelchair, and if the universe was going to hand me a machine that made the people I loved stronger, she was going in slot 1, and that was the end of the discussion. And the packs taught me the shape of the new ladder while they were at it. Above martial god rose the martial saint, and above that the domain overlord, and above that the heavenly human realm, and above all of it the word legendary, hanging up at the top of the stairs like a star. I had a long way to climb. I'd started to enjoy that fact instead of resenting it, because now I had a home in this bigger world, and it was on fire. The star ancient clan of Tiandu City, my clan, in the world's new memory, was being wiped out by a rival house called the Wu clan, who wanted the Star Jade Disc, the treasure the clan's whole strength ran through. Their 4th-ranked saintess finally reached me and begged their young master Duan to come out of seclusion and save them. Here's the joke of my new identity. In the backstory, young master Duan was a cold constitution weakling, a man who couldn't cultivate a step, an amplifier the clan protected and pampered like a mascot, useless in a fight and precious as a battery. So they expected me to come home and hide behind them. Instead, I activated the Star Secret Manual. Every member of the Star Ancient clan, the elders, the guards, the servants who'd spent years bringing the cold constitution young master his tea and his blankets, swelled to 3 meters tall with 10 times their strength, my starlight pouring into all of them at once, and a clan that had been getting slaughtered an hour before stood up as a wall of giants and routed the Wu clan clean off our own doorstep. The saintess stared at the light streaming off her useless mascot of a young master. She was going to spend a lot of that day staring. And when the Wu clan sent a kill squad specifically at the helpless young master Duan, I stepped onto the blood soul demonic blade, rose up into the air the way no cold constitution weakling ever could, and swept their 10 elites out of the sky. The saintess watched her pampered battery of a young master fly on a saber and reap a strike team, and I could see her entire understanding of me rearrange itself in real time, which is a look I never get tired of. I looted a grade 9 herb off the mess and refined a batch of imperial pills because a good host restocks. Bai Fang meanwhile fed a whole town to his golden finger and climbed to 6th rank, picking up a tenth of a black dragon bloodline on the way, and then he came to Tiandu City for love. There was a girl, Zhao Yumei, and her family was holding a martial contest to choose her a husband, and Bai Fang meant to win her by winning it. The trouble for him was that Zhao Yumei had once been offered to young Master Duan, to me, and I'd been in seclusion and declined, and now that young Master Duan had come back flying on sabers, the Zhao family very much wanted to reopen that offer. I accepted their invitation to the contest. Zhao Yumei served me tea, and I slotted the loyal saintess into the second seat of the jade pool, because my household had a way of growing, and the machine had 7 chairs. The contest was almost too easy to be fun. Bai Fang swept the field at 6th rank, and then, to seal his victory with Zhao Yumei's heart, he stood up in the winner's ring and recited a love poem, soft, tender, gazing into her eyes like a man who'd bled it onto the page himself. I recognized it around the 3rd line. It was copied, word for word, off the internet, the kind of poem a million men have pasted into a million messages, and I was fairly sure I'd read it in my old life on the back page of a noodle shop forum, so I took out my phone and recorded him, every stolen line. Then I flew down off my blade, strolled past the reciting poet, scooped Zhao Yumei up out of her seat, and carried her out of his arena while he was still mid-verse, which did wonderful things to his composure. "Put her down!" he shouted, coming after me, 6 ranks of fury. I flicked one finger. He went out of the winner's ring, and through the next, tumbling clean out of all 10 contest circles in a row and into the dirt beyond the last one, and the whole husband-choosing was settled by a finger and a phone recording. Zhao Yumei's favor swung to young Master Duan. Bai Fang finally understood that the man in his way had never once been a mere martial emperor, and he fled. His halo dropped to 74,000, 15 more packs, and I had a recording of a city-eating protagonist reciting stolen poetry that I was very much looking forward to using. I took Zhao Yumei along to spy on Bai Fang, partly to keep an eye on him, and partly because a protagonist's stolen love interest makes an excellent audience. Bai Fang fed another sight to his finger, climbed to the middle of 6th rank, picked up a 2nd drop of black dragon blood, and then got lucky in the ugly way he always did. He came upon a mutual kill, a kindly phoenix cry queen, a 7th rank woman with a good reputation, down and poisoned after slaying a sword-backed beast that had gotten her in the end. Bai Fang pocketed the beast's crystal on the sly, then made a show of handing her the visible treasures to look generous, nursed her for 3 days to look sincere, and to seal the sainthood recited her a love poem, gazing deep into her eyes. The same poem, the exact same stolen poem, word for word, that he'd used on Zhao Yumei in the contest ring. So Zhao Yumei and I walked in, and I took out my phone, and I played the recording. Bai Fang's voice, reciting the identical poem to a different woman, in the same tender hush, the romance of a man reading a script off the internet to whoever's in front of him. I let it run to the end. Nobody in that clearing breathed. "Different girl," I said when it finished. "Same poem, word for word." I glanced at the screen. He didn't even swap the metaphors. "Look, I'll play it again. You can say it along with him." Bai Fang's mouth opened and shut. There is no line a man can deliver after his own voice has just delivered the same line to someone else. The Phoenix Cry Queen's gratitude curdled on her face. Zhao Yumei's went cold as a shut door, and Bai Fang, exposed as a serial liar in stereo, tried to teleport away, except I'd already woven a net of saber key around the clearing, and his jade fizzled against it, and to buy his escape he had to throw down the beast crystal he'd hidden. He ran. I healed the Phoenix Cry Queen's poison with a martial god antidote, and a 7th rank woman of standing now owed me a favor and thought Bai Fang was pawn scum, which is a good afternoon's work. His halo dropped to 63,000, 10 more packs. I opened a batch, pulled 2 more fragments and a spirit essence liquid, and poured the liquid into Fan Lihua, who was climbing fast in the jade pool and had started, in her quiet way, to look like the woman I remembered from the top of the last life. Bai Fang's next move was ambitious. He called in a favor from Cheng Wei, the heir of the Qingluan sect, to get into the Emperor Abyss, a conquered ruin holding the skull of a dead 9th-grade martial emperor, a skull that still broadcast emperor law so that the deeper you descended into its pressure, the more of that law you could comprehend and the faster you broke through. As an outsider, Bai Fang was granted 1,000 meters of depth. His golden finger made him immune to the crushing pressure though, so he broke his word to the friend who'd vouched for him and kept descending past 1,000 meters all the way to the great emperor's skull itself. And being Bai Fang, he planted a locator on the way down so he could sacrifice the entire Qingluan sect as an escape hatch if things went wrong. I got to the bottom first. I lifted the skull off its rest and I stomped his locator flat, and I was gone before he understood the treasure had walked off. The whole Qingluan sect descended when their emperor law went silent, and they found Bai Fang at the bottom with no skull and no explanation, and they would not believe an outsider had beaten their heir to their own sect's heart, so they blamed Bai Fang for the theft. And I let them believe it for exactly as long as it took the crowd to gather, and then I gave them the rest. You want your thief, I said, to the assembled Qingluan sect, to the ancient clans of Tiandu City, to everyone who'd come running the moment the emperor law went silent. Here he is, but you should know what he actually does for a living. I played the poem recording for flavor so they'd have his measure. I held up the locator I'd stomped flat and told them what it was for, and then I explained the golden finger, that this smiling young genius went from city to city and sect to sect planting markers and fed whole territories to a parallel world for power, that the ruins plaguing the region for months, the ones that had buried thousands, weren't disasters at all. They were him, Dung City, the Han family, every catastrophe they'd lit incense over. You could watch it move through the crowd like cold water down a spine. The Qingluan elders, the Tiandu clans, person after person doing the arithmetic and arriving at the same sum. The young man they'd been about to hunt for stealing a skull had been quietly murdering their region for a season, and not one of them had suspected him, because nobody suspects the hero. That's the whole trick of being one. It was also, it turned out, the whole trick of hunting one. A man who eats cities does not survive being introduced that way to the cities he's been eating. Bai Fang teleported out in a hail of curses. His friend Cheng Wei, betrayed and disgraced for vouching for him, was sentenced to 3 years facing a wall. Bai Fang's halo crashed to 37,000, 26 more packs. And I kept the Emperor's skull, which let me cultivate Emperor Law lying down. A nice bonus for a man who appreciates working smart. He went to ground and did the thing desperate men do, which is lean on family. His father Bai Qi, a low martial emperor with an ice-sealing treasure, had been taken by the Zhao ancient clan, who needed him to seal the strange fire burning inside the clan chief Zhao Xuan's youngest daughter, a girl named Zhao Jing, whose own body had frightened everyone around her since childhood. Bai Fang followed his father to the Zhao estate, and there he found his next scheme, and it was, even by his standards, a nasty one. Here was the scheme. Zhao Jing's strange fire had terrified her family her whole life. It burned her from the inside and lashed out at anyone near her, and Bai Fang told her father he could seal it safely with a golden finger formation. But the cure came with a condition. The girl had to stay with him, long-term, 2 full years, for the formation to be reinforced. The Zhao family, desperate and grateful, showered him and his father with gifts worth several of his usual sacrifices, and Bai Fang very nearly walked out with a strange fire girl on a leash. What he was actually selling was a slow detonation array that would keep her fire burning hotter, not seal it, turning the poor girl into a living furnace he could crack open to torch his enemies in a fight. 2 years of quiet agony sold to her family as medicine. I arrived as young Master Duan of the Star Ancient Clan, the #1 house in Tiandu City, and I took the whole thing apart in front of everyone. It's not a seal, I told the hall. It's a slow detonation array. It doesn't quiet her fire, it feeds it. 2 years of reinforcement means 2 years of her burning alive from the inside, quietly, so that when he needs a weapon in a fight, he can open the valve and point her at whoever's in the way. That's a lie, Bai Fang started. Then don't reinforce it. Seal it today, right now, and prove me wrong. I watched him not take the offer. No? Odd. For a formation that's supposed to help her. Zhao Xuan's voice came out low. Zhao where? Does it hurt? And the girl, half fainting in her chair, still tried to protect the man who'd done it to her. Good medicine is bitter, she said. Brother Yunyi told her to bear it. And that was the sentence that finished her father clean through. He came across the hall like a landslide. Bai Fang's gifts and his teleport jade scattered as he ran, and the boy barely blinked out of the estate with nothing, a fresh bounty on his head. His halo dropped to 22,000. Then I did the thing I'd been doing more of lately, the thing that didn't come with a punchline. I cured her, really cured her, sat down across from Zhao Jing, who flinched when I came close because everyone got burned when they came close, and told her the fire wasn't her enemy. I spent an hour teaching her to hold it instead of drown in it. Open the hand, let a flame sit in the palm, close the hand, put it out, again, until the thing that had terrified everyone around her since she was small became a warmth she could carry like a candle and set down whenever she pleased. Her family wept in the doorway. She'd spent her whole life watching people flinch away from her, her own father included, and the only 2 men who'd never once flinched had turned out to be a monster who wanted to make a weapon of her and a masked stranger who fixed her and asked for nothing at all. She kept my number. I'll leave that thread there. Some warmth doesn't need to be paid off in the same breath it's earned. I opened 42 packs and pulled Marshall St. Grade treasures across the board plus 3 fragments, and I synthesized my 4th 12-pointed star. The servant was the Dragon Flame Academy, the real fame of Tiandu City, a school the size of a second city built around a volcano, and the identity made me its first dean, the one who'd tamed the Dragon Flame's strange fire at its heart generations ago. It lifted me into the martial saint realm, and I stood up able to fly on nothing but my own will, no blade required, a whole rung higher than I'd been an hour before. Bai Fang, bountied out of every ancient clan in the city and desperate for power with his sacrifice finger on cooldown, had exactly one lead left, and it humiliated him to use it. There was a mentor at the Dragon Flame Academy, a huge, blunt, imposing woman the students called Elderstone, who controlled access to the volcano's cultivation zones and who could be bought if a man was willing to debase himself far enough, and Bai Fang was, so the proud son of destiny spent his days flattering a mentor who enjoyed watching him grovel, running her errands, hauling her things, emptying his pockets of every treasure he had left, doing whatever menial, dignity-shredding task she invented next, all for another layer of access to the mountain. He told himself it was worth it. He told himself he'd pay any price. Just think of it. He decided as being someone's dog for a while, and he gritted his teeth and fetched. The academy was another city in itself, a bullet train ride from the gate to the crater, and the volcano's cultivation zones ran 10 layers deep, each one closer to the strange fire, each one faster. Bai Fang crawled his way down to the 8th layer over 8 grueling days of servitude, and he broke through to Martial God, 7th rank, on the volcano's heat. And then, on the 8th layer, near the core, he finally saw it, the true strange fire, a fist-sized flame that flickered like a living thing at the heart of a 3-story bonfire, fatal to anyone who came within a few meters. Bai Fang looked at it and stopped thinking about cultivation zones and started thinking about theft. He had a plus-grade fire-sealing formation from his golden finger and a 10,000-year ice silkworm besides, and if he could just weaken that fire enough to seal it, he could steal it whole and build his own academy, his own everything. He threw the silkworm in, and the great fire hissed and shrank, and step by step he began to close the distance. My Star Ancient clan convoy reached the academy just as the sky over the crater started to look wrong. I went up ahead of everyone, flying wrapped in flame, which, I learned from the reaction below, was the exact image the academy's old mentors remembered of their first dean, a figure they'd nicknamed the Flame Walker, always wreathed in fire, face never shone. I told the mentors the truth they hadn't wanted to see. The strange fire was dying, and the moment it went fully out, the volcano it had suppressed for a decade would erupt and take the whole academy with it. Elderstone's face went through several colors as she understood that the fetching, groveling boy she'd been enjoying had used her to gut the school's heart. The mentors scrambled for the crater, half an hour away, and I flew straight over their heads because I didn't have half an hour. I came down at the core, and the strange fire saw me and knew me. That's the part I didn't expect to feel. In the world's backstory, I hadn't just tamed that fire, I'd saved it, pulled it half dead out of some old ruin, and hidden it here in the volcano to heal across 10 quiet years, and now it recognized the man who'd carried it to safety. It leapt up out of the silkworm's chill, guttering and desperate, and it threw out one small flame like a pointing finger straight at Bai Fang, accusing him, telling on him the way a hurt thing tells on whoever hurt it. I crushed the ice silkworm in my fist, and the fire flared back to its full height, and then it flowed into my palm and merged into me. Home at last, 10 years of recovery finished. And Bai Fang's teleport jade shattered in his pocket because I'd broken it, and he had nowhere left to run. Mentors closing in behind him, Elderstone howling betrayal, and the man who was somehow both the useless young Master Duan and the returned first dean standing between him and the door. He liked fire so much, so I threw him into the lava. I'll give you the result and spare you the process because that's the deal I've made with myself about these things. He went in and he did not come out the way he went in, and the golden finger saved his life at the last possible second by wrapping him in a black coffin at the cost of half its power, and he drifted out through an underground river burned past recognition and entirely, finally, out of his mind. The strange fire settled into me, fully recovered, and the old mentors of the Dragon Flame Academy looked up at the flame-wrapped figure at their crater and wept because their first dean had come home, and Bai Fang, drifting broken down a black river, made his last decision. He had always held one card he'd never played. 10 locators, planted years ago throughout Tiandu City, the whole city and the academy wired to be fed to his golden finger. He'd never used them. It was his hometown, the one place he'd told himself he had a line he wouldn't cross, the audience he'd wanted to impress rather than erase. The lava burned that line away with everything else. He cut open his own chest and sewed the last teleport jade inside himself so I could never shatter it again, sent his father to the next city, and reached out to all 10 locators at once. He sacrificed Tiandu City. The sky went the color of a wound. Devilish chi poured out of 100 tears in the air, and the ordinary people it touched fell and rose again as shambling things, and monsters came up through the streets, some 30 of them, and among those, 3 at the strength of 8th grade beasts, and 1 at the 9th, enough to end every powerful figure in the city. Bai Feng's cultivation rocketed on the sacrifice. 9 drops of flood dragon essence blood dropped into his hands as a reward, and he burrowed 50 meters down to refine the blood in peace and wait for the show, for the monsters to clear out everyone who'd humiliated him so he could crawl up afterward and pick over what was left. But I was a martial saint now, and this was my city and my academy, and I did not intend to wait in a hole. I ran the Star Secret manual and turned my whole clan into 10 times giants, and where the beasts came at us I met them. The 8th grade ones went down under a single palm each, and the Dragonflame Academy handled its own without my help. I crossed the city putting down horrors and lifting the devilish chi off the living where I could, and then I went to the center, to the 9th grade beast that was the ruin's beating heart, and I stepped on it. Once, its skeleton came apart, and I reached into its skull and pulled out the dragon origin crystal that was the core of the whole catastrophe, and the ruin collapsed. The wound in the sky sealed. Sunlight came back down over Tiandu City, and the people who were left looked up out of a nightmare into an ordinary afternoon, and every one of them knew who to thank. Then I dug Bai Feng out of the ground. I pulled him up out of his 50-meter hole in front of tens of thousands of witnesses, the whole city, the ancient clans, the academy, everyone he'd ever wanted to impress, filthy and half-transformed and mid-sneer, because he was still sure the monsters had done his work for him. He couldn't even sense the man holding him. His perception slid right off me and found nothing, and he took that as proof I was beneath him. It was the opposite. A lower cultivator's senses can't find a martial saint at all. I was simply too far above the ceiling of what he could perceive. Someone in the crowd said it for me. That's young Master Zhou Han. He's a martial saint. Bai Feng laughed, cracked and wet. Impossible. I'd feel a saint. I can't feel anything off him at all. He's nothing. You can't feel me because you're beneath the floor I'm standing on. I let him have that one. Let it climb all the way up. A whole city, Bai Feng. You ate a whole city because you couldn't stand to lose one contest, one girl, one fire you didn't even own, and you still lost all of it. I watched the word saint land on him, all the way down, in front of every single person he'd ever wanted to impress. Then I pressed one palm down, and the son of destiny who ate a city rather than lose came apart into dust and blew away on the clean new wind. His destiny halo shattered to nothing, and 100 gift packs rained down out of a blue sky over a city I'd just handed back its life. 124 packs later, the system flagged the next one, and this one was different in a way that made me sit forward. Song Tian, a martial god at the peak of 9th rank, half a step from martial saint, 120,000 destiny, and his golden finger wasn't luck or a sword, it was a system, like mine. He has a system, my window said, and I swear it sounded unsettled. Like me, a rival unit. Is that a problem? It's a colleague, which is worse. The window went quiet a moment. Please don't lose to a better run system than me. I have very little dignity left, and I'd like to keep it. He could feed it 1,000 low-grade things and get one high-grade thing back, or dump a horde into it and pour the whole sum out as a single burst of energy. The first protagonist I'd ever met who played the same game I did. He'd introduced himself to me already, in a way. He was the one who'd robbed my Star Ancient Clan's low-grade warehouse a few days back, on the run from the Ling family who'd been chasing him across from Tianhai City. I caught up to him as the 3 Ling family peaks cornered him, and watched him gulp a synthesized martial saint pill and break through on the spot and beat all 3 of them senseless. Genuinely impressive, in the way a man setting his own house on fire to stay warm is impressive. Then I stepped in, mentioned that he'd robbed me, and let him try me. He threw a Dragon Meridian punch, the pride of his fresh martial saint strength, and it did nothing, and I gave him a short lesson on what Dragon Meridian power actually is by breaking both his arms and caving in his chest with it. But I let him run. I was only an early martial saint myself. I didn't yet have the crushing margin over him I like to have before I closed a door, and there's no sense forcing a fight you'd only most of the way win. I caught him properly at the alchemist competition in Tianhai City. Song had entered to win its grand prize, and he won the way he did everything, synthesized a flawless, perfect-grade pill in his system and palmed it into his furnace, faking the whole alchemy while the judges swooned. So I walked in, produced a handful of the same perfect pills out of a bottle, and then, when the judges demanded proof, refined 10 more from scratch with my bare hands, no furnace, in front of everyone. That's the difference between a man who steals miracles and a man who makes them. Song had been smug about it, right up to the end. Prove it, he'd sneered, certain I couldn't. You say the perfect pill is yours? Then make one, right here, in front of everybody. So I did. No furnace, no scale, Just my hands and a fistful of raw material and about 90 seconds, and 10 flawless pills rolled off my palm, one after another, while the entire alchemist guild forgot how to close its mouth. He'd handed me the microphone and asked me to sing. Song was exposed as a thief and a fraud in front of the whole guild and its president's daughter, Fang Ru, who'd been quite taken with him a minute earlier and was now looking at him like something she'd found on her shoe. I collect geniuses, she told him, cold as the guild's cellar, not thieves who rob them. He lost first place, the 9 Heavens dragon pill, and the girl, all in the same breath. His halo dropped to 103,017 packs, and I put the day to good use. I gave Fan Lihua and my loyal saintess 2 sacred martial heavenly pills apiece, and both of them broke through into the martial saint realm with innate Tao bodies, a full realm up in an afternoon. Song and his sworn brother Guo Hao and a rival named Ding Gang got themselves trapped in a treasure ruin next, a vault behind a door that only opened to a precise resonance, over an abyss of devilish chi, on a platform that dropped you if you lingered past 10 breaths. Song poured a whole river of looted low-grade junk into his system and converted it to one massive burst to blast the door. I just knocked the correct rhythm on it, the resonance was in a plot prompt, and it swung open, and I took all 3 treasures inside using the wives from my jade pool, who could each claim one. Song, furious, hit me with his entire stored burst of energy, and I opened a spirit absorption bag and let it eat the whole blast and then feed it back into me as strength. He watched his ultimate trump card make his enemy stronger and fled. His halo dropped to 90,000, 13 more packs. Then I found out where he lived, and it was perfect. I synthesized a 12-star and got Fang Jiangxing, the master of the Sword Sect, and the identity made me the one and only personal disciple the Sword Sect's founding ancestor ever took. The rightful sect master, the one Fang Jiangxing had been keeping the seat warm for. It lifted me to the peak of martial saint. I declined the throne and took the title of chief elder instead, because I don't do paperwork, and because Song Tian's home sect was, of course, this sword sect. He came home to prepare for the sect's grand tournament, the Dragon Soaring 9 Heavens, and recruited 10 junior brothers to gather low-grade materials to feed his system. And I, as chief elder, summoned all 10 of them and confiscated their storage rings, and just like that, his whole supply chain evaporated the day before the contest. The tournament had 3 stages, and Song scraped through the first 2 on fumes and humiliation, watched with growing disgust by a genius girl named Sun Yi he'd hoped to impress. The 3rd stage was the 9 Heavens Divine Thunder Array, a lattice of real and illusory lightning where the trick was to walk through the fake bolts and dodge the real ones. Every contestant before him had strolled it, and I ran the array personally because in the world's backstory, I'd built the 9 Heavens Divine Thunder Array myself at 15. The trick of the array is that half the lightning is real and half is illusion, and a good contestant reads which is which and walks the safe path through. Every contestant before Song had strolled it. Song watched them do it, memorized the safe route, and stepped onto the first level sure he had it figured. The safe bolts turned real the instant he leaned toward them. The killing bolts turned harmless the instant he flinched away, so that dodging cost him, and trusting cost him, and standing still cost him, and there was no read, because I was rewriting the answer key live, 1 step ahead of his feet. Outside, the crowd made sympathetic noises about how uncannily unlucky the poor boy was. Inside, Song was screaming that it was impossible, that no one could be this cursed, that the array had to be broken. The array was not broken. The array was mine, and I was aiming it by hand. He crawled out the far side of the 9th level, charred and shaking, white smoke coming off him, having spent a fortune of his own destiny just to survive a storm I was pointing at his head. And when he looked up from the floor to find out who'd done it to him, the Sword Sect announced my true identity as the ancestor's sole disciple, and even the sect master bowed, and Song understood at last exactly whose house he'd been hiding in, whose tournament he'd entered, whose lightning he'd been walking through. His halo bled down to 38,000 across the whole event, 52 packs, all told, out of 1 tournament. Song ran from the Sword Sect, rebroke to the middle of Martial Saint on black market pills, and got a paper crane in the wind, an invitation from Fan Tao, master of the rival Ling Fan sect. Now, Fan Tao was interesting. In the backstory, he'd been the other top candidate to inherit the Sword Sect's ancestor, the one passed over the day the old man chose me, and he'd broken away in bitterness to found his own sect. He offered Song a free 9 Heavens Dragon Soul pill, no strings, and hinted at a great mission, and I let Song take it and go, because a plot prompt had already shown me the good part. There was an opportunity waiting in the Ling Fan sect that only a genuine son of destiny could unlock, and I wanted Song to unlock it before I took it. Fang Jianxing fumed about the defection. I told him to be patient. The Ling Fan sect had been built on top of an ancient cave heaven, a treasure land guarded by a maze of 10,000 doors, a pure test of luck, no strength involved, a place both the old ancestor and Fantao himself had failed. Fantao had spent years sweet-talking a dozen different chosen ones into trying it and dying in it at almost no cost to himself on the chance one of them got lucky. Song felt the maze calling to him and walked in, and Fantao watched him go with a thin smile and thought, another one tricked in. Except Song really was a son of destiny, and destiny's whole point is that the 10,000-door maze opens for exactly this man. He closed his eyes, followed the pull, walked the correct doors, and the maze fell away, and at its heart, he found the prize. A martial Dao mantra stele, an opportunity that led all the way to the domain overlord realm, plus a flowing cloud dawnbreaker sword, a dawn sacred cannon, and a mist key formation plate besides. He pocketed the stele in secret, meaning to keep the real treasure for himself and fob his new master off with the scraps. That was when I brought the sword sect down on the Ling Fan sect. Fang Jianxing had wanted to conquer his sect's oldest rival his whole life, and I handed it to him. Fantao met me himself. We'd both inherited the same ancestor's sword, so it came down to a pure duel of sword intent, technique against technique, nothing else allowed, the cleanest way two disciples of one master can settle which of them the old man should have picked. Our intents crossed once, that was all it took. Mine went deeper because the ancestor had chosen right the first time, and Fantao felt it, the way you feel a door you've been shoving your whole life turn out to have been a wall. So it really was you. His voice went very quiet. All these years I told myself he'd gone senile at the end, that he picked wrong. He lowered his sword. He didn't, did he? No. He conceded and turned to leave with his life. I asked him whether I'd said he could go. Then I finished it, because a man who builds an entire sect out of the grievance of coming second is a man who comes back for another try eventually, always, and I've told you already how I am about loose threads. Then Song came out of the maze into a conquered sect, and I stripped him piece by piece, the sword, the cannon, the formation plate, and then I reached into his storage ring and plucked out the domain overlord stele he thought he'd hidden. He escaped by a hair, burning a blood-drop treasure to tear himself free. His halo hit 0, 21 packs, 105 all told. Broken and hunted, Song decided to leave Tianhai City for good. But first he stopped to keep a promise, and I'll give him this one piece of credit, because credit where it's due even for a man I was farming. A dead friend named Mo Cheng had once asked him to look after his little sister, and Song, on his way out of town, went to find her. Her name was Mo Lan, and she was poor, and she gave him the thing her brother had left for him. A moonlight spirit jade, a healing treasure that pulled injuries out of a body and stored them in the stone, usable once every 7 days. Song took it and immediately started thinking about how to weaponize a good deed, which is the most Songtian thing a man ever did. He used it on Songxiang. Songxiang had been the terror of Tianhai City, a martial saint of the late stage, until a curse of bone-eating worms crippled him and drove him into hiding 6 months ago. Song healed him with the Moonlight Jade, drew the worms out into the stone, and Songxiang, restored to his full and considerable power and bound by a standing oath of 3 unconditional favors, agreed to kill me for him and gifted him a flowing light bracelet for luck. What Song didn't know, what Songxiang made sure he didn't know, was the Moonlight Jade's price. After 3 uses, the user withers into a frail old man overnight, and Songxiang had every intention of letting Song be the one to pay it. They marched on the sword sect together, Songxiang announcing to all of Tianhai City that he'd come for Chief Elder Chengwei's head. I was a martial saint at the peak by then. I met the returned terror of Tianhai City at my own gate. He looked me over, this generation's monster, and found a young man in a doorway who wasn't worth the trip. You're the chief elder? I spent 6 months hunting a cure just to come and step on this? I raised one finger. The late-stage martial saint who'd been unbeatable for a generation fell out of the sky in front of the whole city. Song Bracelet escaped by a whisker. I stripped the Moonlight Jade off him as he went, and his Destiny Halo, which had clawed back to something, crashed all the way to 0 again, the system warning me his protagonist's fate had gone unstable, ready to collapse at any moment. He had one friend left in the world to run to. Unfortunately for Song, so did I have a use for that friend. I opened 120 packs and pulled 9 fragments and a heap of Domain Overlord grade loot, and I synthesized a 12-star that gave me a servant named Jin Ye, a wrong Domain Overlord rotting in a prison off in a place called Duanhuang City, which I'd get to. The identity lifted me into the Domain Overlord realm myself, Second Heaven, a whole new tier where I could hold space in my hands, and the system flagged the next protagonist, Shadowblade Killer. A domain overlord of the first heaven, 120,000 destiny, and a golden finger built entirely around killing. The stronger the victim, the more he leveled, with a domain overlord kill worth 100 ordinary points and 1 rare gold point, and 3 gold points buying a single blood escape from certain death. Song Tian ran to him. Shadowblade Killer was his childhood friend, the last door open to him, and Shadowblade Killer, needing points to solve a problem of his own, turned on Song the instant he arrived, promising to develop him at the cost of his life. Song slipped a crack of the grip and fled, wolf's den to tiger's den, straight into my domain, because it was my pressure that had cracked Shadowblade Killer's hold in the first place. And I ended the thing I'd been building toward for a whole city's worth of gift packs the quietest way I ever ended anything. I crushed a dry leaf between two fingers, and Song Tian, the system user, the man who'd played my own game, fell down dead. His halo shattered, and 120 packs rained out of the sky. Shadowblade Killer stared at his dead friend and howled about how important the man had been to him, and I asked him whether that was the same friend he'd been about to murder for points a moment ago, and he stopped pretending. He came at me, and second heaven against first heaven is no contest. And he burned one of his precious gold points on a golden light escape and tore away wounded before I could close. He vowed to kill me for himself now, which they always do, and to warm up first he went to farm easy prey. And of all the places in the world, he chose Tiandu City's Dragonflame Academy, a newbie village, with 8 early martial saints he could harvest for points. He smashed the front of the academy and reached for the volcano's strange fire, only to find it gone, because I'd absorbed it, and he sneered that Tiandu was a garbage town not worth the trip. Then he turned to murder my 8 mentors, and I stepped out of the air in front of him, the first dean of the academy he was standing in, and asked him whether he really meant to lay hands on my people. Shadowblade Killer looked at me, understood he'd walked onto my oldest turf to farm my own students, and burned a second gold point to blood escape. Gone again, wounded again, alive again. That one got away. He's still out there, as far as I know, a chosen one with a kill quest golden finger and a personal grudge, running loose in a wide world, which is exactly the kind of loose thread I've told you I can't stand. Some threads you have to leave for another day. His halo only slipped to 100. And 18,000. I'd barely touched him. He'll be back. I opened 122 more packs, pulled 8 more fragments, and the system did something new. It started upgrading my villain star again. 6 points to 12-2. Now, 24. A resonance grade star that promised divine rank servants and boss identities, a whole class above anything I'd pulled yet. It was at 1% and climbing. The Dragonflame Academy hailed its returned dean, and I would have liked to stay and enjoy it, except a clock was running somewhere I couldn't see. My newest servant, Jin Ye, the wronged domain overlord, the man the last 12-star had bound to me, was one day from execution in a prison in Duanhuang City, and a servant of mine dying in a cell over an injustice was not a thing I was going to allow, so I pointed my shuttle boat at Duanhuang City and went to go break a good man out of jail. Duanhuang City was the oldest of the ruin-touched cities, a place so soaked in cultivation it had stopped pretending to be a modern city at all. And its heavenly prison held Jin Ye, whose whole crime was doing his job too well. He'd guarded the Dusk Ruins, a living ruin with an open tunnel that never stopped spitting monsters, and he'd nearly cleared it single-handed, turned it into a treasure trove that made the city rich, and for that the 5 great powers of Duanhuang City had framed him, seized the ruins, and thrown him in a cell to die. In the story, he was supposed to be the wronged hero whose vindication came when a monster tide proved his worth. The tide never came. The universe had cast him as a hero and then simply forgotten to save him, and he'd been sitting in the dark for weeks, waiting for a rescue the plot owed him and was never going to deliver. So I delivered it. I came in with Fan Lihua and the Saintess, both late-stage martial saints now, and Wu Xiaofang along for luck, and I took the heavenly prison apart and lifted Jin Ye out of the dark. He looked up at me and couldn't believe it. "Master." Barely a sound. "Is it really? I thought I dreamed you." "You didn't dream me. Stand up." "I failed. They took the ruins. They took everything. I couldn't." He was weeping now, a domain overlord in chains apologizing for being betrayed. "I disgraced you. You held a monster tide back single-handed and they threw you in a hole for it. That's not disgrace. That's them." I broke the chains with a thought. "Disgrace would be me leaving you in here. Now get up. We're going to go take it all back." He'd spent his whole imprisonment sure he'd shamed the master who taught him everything. He hadn't. I healed him with the Moonlight Spirit Jade I'd taken off Song Tian, drew the prison's damage out of him, poured pills into him until he stood at the peak of his rank again, and then I told him we were going to go and take back everything that had been stolen from him, one thief at a time. We started that same day. He reclaimed the Dusk Ruins and put down the 2 who'd framed him, and the strength came back into him with every step, the way it does when a wronged man finally gets to stop being patient. When the Ning and Guo families realized Jin Ye was loose and unbroken, they lured him into a great formation, a citywide sky fist, the Guo family's ancestral trump, built over generations to crush a domain overlord flat. It came down out of the clouds toward my disciple like a mountain deciding to fall. I caught it. One palm, raised, and the fist that 100 cultivators had poured their lives into stopped against it and then came apart into drifting light, and the Guo manor came down with it. Jin Ye walked out of the settling dust into a city that had spent weeks calling him a villain and was learning, very fast, that it had bet on the wrong side of the wrong man. "Master," he said, looking at the rubble, then at me. "You didn't have to. I know, you had it. I hadn't, and he hadn't, but a master lets his disciple keep the parts of the win that are his. The rest of the day's yours. Go collect. And I'll leave the rest of that reckoning where it stands, with 3 great powers of Duanhuang City hiding behind their walls trying to learn the name of the man who broke a domain overlord formation like a dinner plate, because a good reckoning shouldn't be rushed, and because I've learned to enjoy the part where they're still afraid. That's most of the story." I could keep going. The star is upgrading towards something the system won't stop calling divine rank. There's a chosen one with a kill quest and a grudge still loose out there in the wide world, and above domain overlord the stairs keep climbing, heavenly human, legendary, up into heights I can't see the top of yet. There's always another one coming. There's always a taller flight of stairs. That part never ends, and honestly, I hope it doesn't. But let me leave you where I started, because that's the part that still gets me. I opened my eyes in this life on a marble floor, cast as the villain. The rich boy everyone in the story was waiting to watch lose, with 2,000 yuan thrown at my feet like scraps to a dog they'd decided to stop feeding. Everyone knew how it ended. The villain always loses. That's the whole reason he exists. And now I stand a domain overlord who hands out world-shaking treasures like loose change, with a god of wealth who calls me boss, and a butler who stopped being surprised, with a wrong disciple avenged, and a frightened girl I gave a real family to, and a whole household of the strongest people alive who once lined up to die for me and had to be told they didn't have to. I broke every chosen one the universe pointed at me, not one of them by luck, and I climbed a ladder that has no top. But that's not the part that gets me. The part that gets me is a cold, quiet woman who cultivated at my side to the roof of one whole life and lost me at the end of it, and threw herself forward across death on a promise, and then woke up alone in a broken body and waited years in a wheelchair in a house full of strangers for the one thing she wanted, which was to find out whether the man she'd crossed 2 lifetimes for had woken up too. She had, he had, I did. The villain the story threw away got the one ending the story never writes for him. He found her again, and he brought her home, and this time, nobody is going to corner us on the roof of the world. They gave me the villain system. They should have read to the end before they cast me. Ask me who wins in a story like this, and I'll tell you the same thing I told a genius doctor and a dragon king, and a peerless prodigy and a martial god, right before the floor came out from under each of them. Guess.